Hello, welcome to my channel. Today we are making over 100 Christmas DIYs. So let's get started. This DIY is a Christmas joy sign. I got this sign at Dollar Tree and I'm painting it this pretty green color in the shade Aloe from Deco Art. These little wood slices are from Dollar Tree and I'm writing out the word joy with one letter on each wood slice. I'm now hot gluing the wood pieces onto the sign. I'm using this burlap lace ribbon from Dollar Tree to make a bow for the bottom of the sign. This is a super simple bow. I'm just cutting the ribbon into several pieces, then crisscrossing them and hot gluing them in place. Next, I'm adding a little wood bead to the center of my bow. I'm adding these little wood snowflakes to the top of the sign. These are also from Dollar Tree. To create the sign's hanger, I'm using floral wire and I'm stringing a bunch of small wood beads onto the wire. I'm attaching the wire to the back of the sign using hot glue. This DIY is a little nativity scene. I'm using this wooden house shape from Dollar Tree for the manger, and I'm painting it white with chalk paint from Folk Art. I'm distressing it a little bit by dry brushing some brown paint over top of the white. For my Mary and Joseph figurines, I'm using tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. I'm painting Mary a light blue and Joseph brown, both of which are Dollar Tree paints. For their heads, I'm using wood beads and hot gluing them to the tops of the blocks. These are my finished little people. Now I want Joseph to be a little bit taller than Mary, so I'm hot gluing him onto a couple of letter tiles from Dollar Tree. You could also use a little wood block or anything that's going to raise him up a bit. This part will be covered up, so you don't have to worry about painting it or making it look nice. I'm using this burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree to create baby Jesus. I'm cutting off a piece of the ribbon, then rolling it up and trimming it down until it's the right size. Now I'm hot gluing a smaller wood bead on the end of the burlap piece for the head, then hot gluing little baby Jesus onto the front of Mary and Joseph. I'm taking some moss and gathering it on the bottom of the manger scene, hot gluing it in place. Next, I'm taking this white berry garland from Dollar Tree and I'm draping it over the manger. I'm folding it in half so it's doubled up, and then hot gluing it in place on the roof. To finish off my nativity, I have this star from Dollar Tree. It is glittery gold on one side, but I'm gluing it so the plain wood side is facing out because that matches the aesthetic much better. This DIY is a braided wreath. I have this 9-inch embroidery hoop that I previously spray painted this copper color, and this will be the base of the wreath. To make the braid, I'm using jute cord and I'm cutting 9 strands that are each 4 feet long. I'm tying an elastic band around the top of the strands to keep them together, and I'm also sticking them to the table with some tape. I'm separating the strands into 3 sections of 3 strands each, then braiding them all together. Now that my braid is finished, I'm hot gluing it to the embroidery hoop. I ended up with a longer braid than I needed, so I'm just going to cut it off at the end. The part where the 2 ends of the braid come together doesn't look so great, but it will get covered up with all of the embellishments. This greenery is from Dollar Tree, and I'm hot gluing it to the bottom of the wreath. I'm also adding little white berries and pine cones to finish it off. This DIY is a buffalo check Merry Christmas sign. I'm using this sign from Dollar Tree, and I'm taking off the burlap Christmas garland because I will be using that in this DIY. I'm using one of the new 2023 Dollar Tree calendars, flipping to the December page, and I'm cutting out the word Merry and the wreath. For the background of my sign, I'm using the black and white buffalo check vinyl from Dollar Tree. I'm tracing out the sign onto the vinyl, then cutting it out and sticking it onto the sign. Now to add the calendar pieces I cut out earlier, I'm hot gluing Mary and the wreath onto the sign, and I'm also adding the burlap Christmas garland to the bottom. For the sign's hanger, I'm using wood beads and floral wire. I'm stringing the beads onto the wire and hot gluing the wire in place on the back of the sign. This DIY is a wooden joy sign. I got this wood sign from Dollar Tree, and I'm starting by painting the O green with the shade Holly Green from Deco Art. I got this neutral checked ribbon on sale at Michael's for $2, and I'm using it to cover the J and Y of the sign. I'm tracing out the letters onto the ribbon, then gluing it in place. I first tried using a glue stick, but it wasn't really working, so instead I'm using tiny dabs of hot glue. I realized later I'm actually missing a piece of the J, which I did find, and I'll be gluing back on later. The Y is wider than the actual ribbon, so I'm having to do this in a couple different sections. Next, I'm using this burlap lace ribbon to create a bow for the bottom of the sign. I'm creating 3 loops in the ribbon, 1 smaller in the center and 2 slightly larger ones on either side. Then I'm hot gluing it all in place so it holds together and hot gluing it to the sign. I'm making a snowman candle out of one of these tall candles from Dollar Tree with some ribbon for the scarf, 2 pipe cleaners for the arms, and 2 black buttons. I have this black Sharpie and orange permanent marker I'll be using to make the eyes and nose, although I do end up having to use a slightly different technique than I was planning on, which you will see later on. I'm starting by twisting the 2 pipe cleaners together until I have what looks like 2 arms. Then I'm cutting off a piece of the ribbon for his scarf and tying it around the candle. I tried drawing on the eyes with the Sharpie, and it does work a little bit, but it's not quite as dark and pigmented as I was hoping for. But it's when I try using this permanent marker that nothing happened. You can't even see the orange on the glass at all. So what I did instead was I drew these eyes and a carrot nose and a mouth on a piece of paper, and then I cut them out and glue them on the candle. If you have paint markers, I think that is supposed to work a lot better on glass. I didn't have those, so I made do with the paper and hot glue, and I actually think it turned out pretty well. Sometimes you have to make do with what you have. Now I'm just tucking the pipe cleaner in the back of the scarf. You could glue this in place if you wanted to, but I found that it actually stayed in place pretty well. And now I'm gluing on the buttons. I found these 2 black buttons at Michael's, and they were only about $1 for the 2 of them. But of course, if you have any buttons just laying around your house, that works even better. Next, I'm taking this mason jar. I got a pack of 3 at Dollarama for just a couple of dollars. And I'll be using some Mod Podge, this glittery fake snow, Epsom salts, some jute cord, and a couple of berries and leaves from this arrangement, along with a foam brush. First, I'm mixing the Epsom salts with some of the glitter, and then I'm applying a thin layer of Mod Podge all over the mason jar. I'm doing this in sections so the Mod Podge doesn't dry too quickly. And now I'm sprinkling on the Epsom salt and glitter mixture. If you have little sections that aren't covered with glitter, that's okay. They're just more spaces for light to shine through when you put a candle inside. But if you did want to cover any of them up, you can do what I'm doing here, which is adding little bits of Mod Podge in the blank sections and then sprinkling on a bit more of the glitter. Now I'll let this dry overnight and then we'll come back. Here's what the jar is looking like so far, covered in the glitter and salt. Now I'm taking this jute cord and hot gluing it to the top of the mason jar. For now, I'm just gluing the two ends of the cord because I want to leave space to tuck in the berries. These are different berries than the ones I showed you to begin with, but I also got these just at the dollar store. I'm taking them apart and then I'm going to trim off the ends and twist them back together. And now I'm gluing them in place and then tucking in the very ends underneath the cord. Now I'm going around and gluing down any of the sections of the cord that I think need to be glued down. I'm going to cut off a 48-inch piece of this floral wire, thread 6 of these beads onto the wire, and then pull them down so there's about 6 inches of wire sticking out the end here. I'm then going to wrap this wire around and weave it through the first bead, and then pull it tight. Next, I'm going to thread 5 beads on the long end of the wire. Now I'm going to thread this long wire through the top of the second bead. Now I'm going to add 2 more beads onto this long wire. Now I'm going to pull this long wire through the bottom bead that I added in the last step when I added the 5 beads. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That would be this one here. And that is the first arm of the snowflake complete. To do the next section, I'm going to weave the wire through this next bead on the circle. Now it's a matter of repeating those steps to make all the arms of the snowflake. Again, I'm adding 5 beads. Then I'll put the wire through the second top bead and pull that through. Now I'm adding 2 more beads. Then I'm threading the wire through this bottom bead here. To start the next arm of the snowflake, you always want to weave the wire through the next bead on the inner circle. Now I've got all the sides of the snowflake done. I'm going to bring these 2 ends of the wire together and pull tight. Then going to wrap them together, then trim it. Here is the finished snowflake ornament. I'll be creating a glitzy Christmas tree decoration with this clear plastic ornament from Dollar Tree, along with this ribbon of sequins. I'm going to cut these so they're in smaller strands, then glue them to the ornament. I'm putting a dot of hot glue right at the top and then attaching the top part of the sequins. Now that the top part of this strand of sequins is attached here, I'm going to wrap it around and then secure it to the very bottom and then keep going around back to the top. There's the first strand wrapped around the ornament. I'm cutting off another section of this sequin ribbon here. This time I left it so there are 3 sequins across on the strand. I want this strand of sequins to be in the middle of these other 2. So I'll add a dollop of glue and then attach this like that. I'm adding a bit more to the very bottom to hold the strand in place. And finally, another dollop of glue at the top. I'm now cutting out some single strands. This time I'm cutting shorter strands because these ones are not going to wrap all the way around the ornament. I'm using an empty toilet paper roll, some burlap from the dollar store, twine, this ribbon with lace on it, a wooden bead for the angel head, and some hot glue. To start, I'm cutting the toilet paper roll in half, and I'm using this circle as a guide to cut some rounded edges off the top two corners of the toilet paper roll. Now I'm rolling it into a cone and then hot gluing it in place. Then wrapping it in the burlap. I'm gluing the edges of the burlap up inside of the toilet paper roll just to hide all of the jagged edges. I'm weaving a piece of string through the wooden bead and then tying a knot because I saw someone else do this step, but it ended up being unnecessary for me because I just glued the wooden bead on top of the toilet paper roll for the head. And now I'm cutting off a piece of this ribbon with the lace and rounding off the edges to make the wings. Now I'm pinching the middle and then tying a piece of string around the middle. I'm ripping off some of this lace from the ribbon to attach to the angel for a bit of decoration on her dress. I wanted a thinner piece of the lace around the bottom, so I'm just cutting one in half and then attaching it along the edge. I'm taking the twine again and adding a bow to the front of her. I'm wrapping the twine around my fingers a few times and then cutting it in half to make the hair. I'm tying a piece of twine around the middle just to keep it all together, and then gluing it on the top of her head. As you can see, the hair is a little wild. It's sticking out everywhere, which is totally fine, but I decided to glue down a few of the pieces just to tame her a little bit. Now I'm adding a loop to the back, so if you wanted to hang this on the tree, then you could. Hey, I hope you're enjoying these Christmas DIYs so far. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I'll be using one of these clear plastic balls from Dollar Tree, along with this gold tissue paper and this white tissue paper with lots of colored dots. And I'll be making some confetti with the tissue paper and stuffing it inside the clear ball. To make the confetti, I'm leaving the tissue paper folded up like this, and I'm cutting thin strips out of the tissue paper. Cutting horizontally into these strands to make tiny little confetti pieces. They don't have to be the same size or anything, just completely random. Pushing that to the side for now, I'm going to make some confetti out of this tissue paper now. I'm taking a little bit of this fake snow as well, just to add a little bit of sparkle inside. You will need a bowl. I got this one at Dollar Tree, some fake snow, a couple of mini Christmas trees, a couple of blocks, some string or twine, and a toy truck. I'm hot gluing two of these blocks together to make a riser for the Christmas trees, and now I'm gluing the trees onto these blocks. I wanted them to be different heights, so if you already have trees that are different heights, then you won't need to do this, but this way it gives me sort of a forested look. I then hot glued these blocks to the bottom of the bowl, and now I'm going to use this string to tie a tree onto the back of the truck. First, I'm hot gluing the string to the front of the truck on the bottom so I can get this diagonal look. Then I'm tying a bow around the tree. Now I'm taking this fake snow and sprinkling it all on the bottom of the bowl, then putting the toy truck inside. I have these felt words and I'm using joy to put in the back of the bowl here. You could glue it in place, but I'm just pressing it up against the Christmas trees and it stays in place. I have 6 larger beads and then 6 of the smaller ones here, and I'm going to start threading them onto the wire. now going to weave the wire on the left here through this top large bead. Now to secure it in place, I'm going to wrap the wire around itself. Now to cut off the ends, I'm going to use this red and white string to make a bow for the wreath. I cut off 2 pieces of the string and I'm going to make a double bow. I'm also going to cut out some holly from this green foam and add it to the wreath. Cut out 4 of these little green foam pieces and I'm going to glue them together to make the holly. Now I'm going to glue this onto the top bead here. And finally I'm taking my double bow and I'm going to glue it right on top there. I'm now going to use this snowflake ribbon to make a loop so I can hang this on the tree. And here's the finished wreath ornament. For this next DIY, I'm taking another one of these mason jars, along with these cinnamon sticks I got at the grocery store, some Christmas ribbon, more of this jute cord, and some greenery and berries from this arrangement. I'm hot gluing each one of the cinnamon sticks to the sides of the mason jar, going all around. I had just enough cinnamon sticks to cover the whole mason jar, although the last few ended up being a little further apart than the rest of the sticks. Now I'm taking a piece of this Christmas ribbon, folding it in half and gluing it in place. I made a little bow out of the jute cord and I'm going to glue it onto the front of the jar. Now I'm cutting off a piece of greenery and some berries from this arrangement and sticking it inside the ribbon just above the bow. You could glue these in place if you wanted to. I found I didn't need to, so I'm going to leave it like this. I'm using another one of these clear plastic balls and I'm going to fill it with this fake snow and these mini trees, both of which I got from Dollar Tree. Anyway, I tried getting this fake snow into the ornament, ended up making a huge mess, but this method of sort of scooping the ornament into the snow worked fairly well. Now it's time to put the tree inside. I probably would recommend doing this before putting all the snow in, but I didn't think of that. So we are going to attempt to get this straight up. I'm getting as much of the glitter out of the way from the bottom as possible. And then I'll glue the bottom here. Oh dear. Okay. Oh no. I think there's a little bit too much glitter in here. Lost the tree. I'll dump some of this out and see what we can do. I mean, that looks cute. I broke off a couple little pieces from a craft stick and I'm going to glue them together and then glue them to the bottom of another little tree just to add a little bit more height to this one. So when I put it in here, it'll be a little more raised up. I'm moving all the glitter to one side as much as I can again, then gluing the bottom of this tree. You know what? That actually looks really cute. I really like that. For the next DIY project, I have one of these tall white candles I got at Dollar Tree, and I'll also be using some of this burlap, which is left over from the burlap wreath I made in the fall. This is from Dollarama, and I'll be using some of this jute cord again, along with some Christmas ribbon that I didn't show here, and some of the greenery from this floral arrangement. To start, I'm wrapping the burlap around the candle to see how much I need, then cutting off a piece, and now I'm gluing it in place. Now I'm cutting off a piece of this Christmas ribbon and wrapping it around the candle and tying a bow. I also made a bow with the jute cord, and I'm going to glue that on top of the Christmas ribbon bow. Now I'm cutting off some leaves from this floral arrangement to add to the candle here. I got these two styrofoam cones from Dollar Tree, and then I have this yarn I got from Michael's, along with these pearl beads, also from the dollar store. To start off, I'm hot gluing all around the bottom of the cone and then attaching the yarn. And I'm continuing all around the cone, hot gluing as I go. I started off being pretty careful where I was putting the yarn as I was going around the cone, but then as time went on, I was a little less careful with it, which is totally okay because you can go back and add more layers of yarn over top of any of the blank spaces. And that's what I'm doing here, is just going over where I think I need to add more yarn and hot gluing it in place. Once I thought there was enough of this gray yarn on the cone, I took this lighter cream colored yarn and wove it around in sort of a diagonal pattern just to add a little more interest to the tree. And now I'm hot gluing these different sized pearls onto the tree. For the smaller cone, I'm taking the cream colored yarn and wrapping it all around and hot gluing it in place. And then I'll also be adding the same pearl beads onto the cone. I'll be filling a clear ornament with some Christmas ribbon. I have this white ribbon with red and white candy canes and this gold ribbon. I'm folding the ribbon accordion style so I can fit it inside the ornament. I'm using tweezers just to move the ribbon around a little bit. I'm putting another small piece of this candy cane ribbon inside. That came together so quickly and so easily, and you could use any color ribbon you want to suit your theme for the tree or whatever colors you're going with. I'm using this grapevine wreath, which is actually the same wreath I used in my fall DIY wreath video. I just took out all the leaves and put them in a bag, and now I'm reusing it for Christmas. For this wreath, I'm using lots of these berries and leaves and pine cones I got at the dollar store. And I'm basically just going to shove them into the wreath as much as I can. And I'll also be using that floral wire again to tie down anything that needs a bit more securing. If you wanted this to be more of a permanent decor piece, you could hot glue everything down to make sure it stays in place. I'm taking another one of these styrofoam cones from Dollar Tree. I actually cut off the bottom of this one just so it would be a different height than the other two Christmas trees I made. I drew the shape of a leaf onto this piece of cardboard, and now I'm cutting it out and I'll use it as a template for all of my foam leaves. At first I thought I'd try to cut multiple leaves at once, so I'm folding the foam in half and then trying to cut around the cardboard leaf. But I didn't really like the way this was working. I found it kind of left these jagged edges. So instead what I did was traced this cardboard leaf all over the piece of foam, and then I cut out each individual leaf. This is definitely time consuming, but it's pretty easy to do. So just put on a TV show or a podcast and get tracing and cutting. I cut an entire sheet of foam into all the little leaves, and I ended up using almost all of them, although I did have a few left over. And now it's time to glue them all in place. For the bottom row, I left part of the leaf hanging down past the edge of the cone a little bit, and I'm gluing them all in a row beside each other. For all the subsequent rows, I'm layering the leaves on top of each other to give a nice 3D effect. Once I got to the top of the tree, I just arranged the leaves so they came to sort of a point at the top. This ornament will be really fun and whimsical because I'll be filling it with all of these little pink and white pom-poms. You could choose whatever colors you wanted, if you wanted to go with more traditional red and green, or any color scheme that you wanted. I saw these pink ones and I had to have them. Stuffed all the pom-poms in here, and this is what it's looking like. This particular pack comes with 32 doilies, 8 of each size, and for these snowflakes you'll need 7 of each size. I'll also be using a glue stick, although I did switch to a hot glue gun later on. To start, you'll want to take one of the doilies and put the good side towards the table, and then fold the doily in half from the bottom to the top. Then make a crease and unfold it. Now fold each side of the doily into the center, then fold it in half again from the bottom to the top. Now unfold the doily again and apply glue to the top edges on the left and right side. Then fold it in half again and press it together. Now you should be able to open up the doily like this. Then put this one to the side and continue with the other 6 doilies. Once you have all 7 doilies done, then you're going to apply some glue to the bottom edge and the middle of the doily, and then stick them all together. I started doing this with a glue stick, but I found it wasn't quite sticky enough, so then I transferred to using a hot glue gun, and I did find that a lot easier. Once you have all 7 of the doilies stuck together, it should open up like this and form a snowflake. Now we just have to attach these last 2 pieces together and then it'll be done. To make a slightly different style of snowflake, I'm going to take the next size up of doily and cut off all of the edges. And then I'm going to repeat all the same steps as before, doing the folding and all of the gluing. I will say the gluing was a lot trickier without the edges there, so I had to make sure that I kept opening it up after I glued and seeing that all the right things were sticking together, because putting the glue on the tiny little pieces of the doilies with all of the holes is tricky. I have this strand of tinsel. I got it at Dollarama for $2, and I'm going to cut off a piece of this and put it inside. Next up, I'm going to be making a snowman hat ornament out of craft sticks. I'll be using 5 of these smaller craft sticks and 2 of the larger ones. I'll also be using some red and black paint, green foam, and little berries to make some holly, and finally some red and white string to make a loop to hang it on the tree. I'm going to paint one of these small craft sticks red. Then I'm going to paint 4 of the small craft sticks black. Lastly, I'm also going to paint 2 of the longer popsicle sticks black. Now that these sticks are dry, I'm going to arrange it to make the snowman hat. I have 4 of the small black ones together, then a small red one, then 2 of the larger black ones. And now to glue them all together. While this is drying, I'm going to cut a piece of holly from this green foam. I got this foam at Dollar Tree, and obviously it's in the shape of a Christmas tree, but you could use whatever foam you can find. I'm going to start with just cutting out a basic shape, and then I'll do more of the detailing later. I'm going to sketch first what I want to cut out with a pencil, and now I'll cut it out. Before I glue the holly in place here, I think I'm going to try and paint some more black over these glue pieces. To make this hat more stable, I painted another craft stick in black, and I'm going to glue it to the back. You can see how wobbly this is right now. Hopefully adding this will help. That made such a big difference. It's so much sturdier. I decided to paint another one to add on here just for double the support. Now I'm going to glue my holly onto the hat. For some extra decoration on the hat, I bought these little berries from Dollarama, and I'm going to cut off a little piece and glue it on. I'm now going to make a loop so it can hang on the tree with this red and white cord. And here is the finished snowman hat. Since we don't have a fireplace, I'm going to use our TV stand as a sort of mantle for the garland. I got this 9-foot garland at Walmart for $5. I was planning on getting a couple of the 12-foot garlands from Dollar Tree, but when I went there this morning, both of the Dollar Trees near me didn't have any left, so I just got this one instead. They also had lighted ones for $15, but I got a pack of these mini lights from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to weave them into this garland. I also have this, which is a strand of pine cones, greenery, and berries, which I got at Dollarama. And I'm going to use these as decorations in the garland. I'm going to start with this and then see how it looks and if I want to add anything else in there. I'm folding the garland in half, then arranging it how I want it to be. Now I'm going to fluff all of these and get it laying how I want it to. I'm taking these lights and putting them onto the garland. The strand of lights wasn't quite long enough to extend across the whole thing, so I'm focusing the lights mostly in the middle of the garland, but I'm weaving them throughout the branches as much as I can. Here's what it's looking like with all the lights on. I'm now taking this strand of pine cones and berries and adding it to the garland. Instead of cutting off pieces of this branch with pine cones and the berries, I decided to just weave it all throughout this garland, which makes it a lot easier. But if you do have smaller pieces or picks that you want to stick into the garland, then you can definitely do that as well. I would recommend maybe tying it around the garland with some string or twine. I'm just weaving it in and then pulling out the branches of the garland out where I think they need to be to cover up some of the branch and then just to make it look really cohesive. I have these gold leaf picks left over from my Christmas wreath video, and I think I'm gonna try and stick some of these in the garland. The sides are particularly lacking just because my strand of lights didn't reach all the way to both ends. So to jazz it up a little bit, I think I'll stick in some of these gold leaves and see how that looks. I really like what this is looking like with those gold leaves popping up in there. And then here's the rest of the garland. I do have 2 more of these leaves that I think I might do in the center here. I have 2 of these candle holders I got from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to put a candle in each of them and then put them on either end of the garland. For this ornament, I'll be covering it with some Epsom salts. I'll also be using some Mod Podge and this foam brush. The first step is to cover the whole ornament in Mod Podge. Let this dry. I put a skewer in this empty ketchup bottle and I'll rest the ornament right on top there. I let this set overnight just to make sure it was totally dry and all the little salt crystals were stuck to the ornament. Now I'm going to carefully brush off any that might be just sitting on top. ornament, I'll be filling it with more of this fake snow, along with these little red berries. I'm not going to try to glue these in, I'm just throwing them in and they'll land where they land. I don't really like how long one of those stems is, so I'm going in with some tweezers to get it out, and then I'll just trim it a bit more. I have this red and white string that I'm cutting off a piece of and putting inside the ornament. The first thing I'm going to do for my snowman ornament is cut off a piece of this jute cord. I think it's always better to cut off more than you think you'll need because you can always trim it later. To make it easier to feed the end of this cord through the beads, I'm going to wrap some Scotch tape around the end. And there we have our little snowman body. I'm going to tie a knot in the bottom so the beads don't fall off, and then I'll trim off the excess. And now I'm going to make a loop at the top so it can hang on the tree. I would have made the loop before putting the beads on and then just strung the beads on both strands of the jute, but this jute cord that I'm using is too thick to fit through these beads. But if you're using string that's thinner than this, then that would totally work. I think instead of tying a knot up here, I'm going to hot glue the loop in place and then cut off the excess. I'm now going to wrap this little end piece around and then glue it in place. Now to turn this little guy into a snowman. I've got a black Sharpie here and I'm going to draw on his eyes. I also have an orange permanent marker to draw on the nose. That one didn't work quite as well. It is kind of bleeding a little bit, but hopefully from far away you won't notice. Now for the mouth. I'm going to add some buttons. The black ink is bleeding a little bit as well. I think maybe the carrot nose is more noticeable just because it's supposed to be that pointy shape, but I still think he looks pretty cute. For this ornament, I'm going to attempt to do kind of a swirled effect with these three paints I have here. I have this pink one in the shade Carnation, this one in the shade Aged Bronze, and this plain glossy white one. I've seen lots of people say it helps the paint stick to the sides of the ornament if you clean it out with either rubbing alcohol or vinegar first. So that's what I did. I poured a little bit of vinegar inside of here and then swirled it all around and let it dry overnight. And now I'm going to squirt the paints inside and see if I can get a swirled effect. Since this jar of paint is much too large to pour into the ornament, I got this dropper from the drugstore for about $2, and I'm going to use this to suck up the paint and squirt it inside the ornament. After resting it on either side for a couple minutes each, all of the blank spaces are filled in with paint. I have a skewer in an empty ketchup bottle here, and I'm going to rest the ornament on top so the rest of the excess paint can drip out and it can dry. I'm going to be using the paint again, but instead of using multiple colors, I'm going to cover the whole thing in one color. I'm using this aged bronze color again. I'll stick the dropper inside the paint and then suck some up and then squeeze it inside the ornament. I'm covering the top with a paper towel, and now I'm going to shake it all around. I'll drop some more paint in here. Like I did with the other painted ornament, I'm going to rest it on one side for a bit so all the paint can drip over to this side, and then after a few minutes I'll switch it over to this side. I'm using this wire wreath form from Dollar Tree along with this 15-foot garland and a couple of these floral picks. One of these metal words from Dollar Tree. I ended up using peace. To make the wreath, I'm wrapping the garland all around the wreath form. Now I'm fluffing it up to fill up the whole wreath. You could glue down any of these decorations. I decided I didn't want it to be that permanent, so I'm just stuffing the stems through the wreath, and then I'll also be wrapping some floral wire around them just to help keep them in place. I'm using this Christmas ribbon to make a bow to put at the top of the wreath. To start with, I'm just making a normal bow, and then I'm making 2 extra loops just to make the bow a lot fuller. I'm using some floral wire I got at Dollar Tree to tie the bow to the top of the wreath. I played around a lot with these decorations, deciding where I wanted all of them to go. And what I love about this kind of thing is you can use whatever you have or whatever you can find to make any kind of wreath you want, and everyone's will look a little bit different, which is kind of fun. I'm using this floral wire to tie down all the different elements on the wreath. I'm just wrapping it around each of them and then tying it in the back. Now I'm adding some gold ribbon to the top so I have something to hang the wreath with.
To make the sleds, I'll be using these longer craft sticks along with these shorter ones. I have some white, brown, and red paint to paint the craft sticks with. And then I also have a bunch of little decorations to add to the sleds. I have these berry picks and these bells, and then also some different colored twine. We have this red and white one, along with all of these metallic colored ones. I'm also going to be using some jute cord along with a hot glue gun. The first thing I'm going to do is paint these two longer craft sticks brown. I'm using this acrylic paint from the dollar store. This is in the shade Burnt Umber. Next, I'm going to take some of this warm white shade to paint the smaller craft sticks. I'm going to make one more sled, so I'll paint 2 more of these long ones in the brown color, and then I'm going to do 5 of these smaller ones, but in red this time. The first thing I'm going to do for my sled is line up 4 of the smaller craft sticks, and 2 of them will be up a little bit higher and then the other 2 lower down in the middle, and then I'll glue them together. Now I'm going to take these 2 longer craft sticks that I painted brown and attach them to this section. Here's my little sled so far. Now I'm going to add this piece on top like that. I got these bells at the dollar store. I'm going to use this string to tie them to the sled. I have this bundle of berries I got at the dollar store that I'm going to separate and cut to attach to the sled. I cut one of the craft sticks to be smaller so I can glue it on the back of the sled here just to make this more sturdy. Now I'm going to cut a loop out of this jute cord. I also put together the red sled, so here are both of them beside each other. You could definitely personalize these any way you wanted by writing people's names on it or dates or anything like that, but I think they turned out really cute. My next project is going to be figuring out a way to hang my stockings. Since we don't have a mantle or a fireplace, I was thinking of stringing them on a garland up on the wall here. And to do that, I got this garland at Dollarama for $2. It's basically just a piece of jute with some little pine cones and red berries. So if you can't find something similar to this, you could easily make it just with some jute string from the dollar store, and you can get bags of these pine cones. Or if you live somewhere that has lots of pine cones around, even better. And then you could attach any berries or greenery that you wanted. I also have a bunch of these decorative bells I got from the dollar store that I might add on here. I think what I'm going to do first is hang this up on the wall and then hang the stockings on it and see if I want to add any more greenery or anything like that to it. To hang this on the wall, I got 2 of these command hooks. I'm going to spray paint these gold just to make them look a little more festive and not stand out so much with the bright white. This is what the hooks are looking like after 2 coats of spray paint. I didn't bother painting the back since those will be against the wall anyway. Okay, I've got my pine cone garland, and now I'm gonna hang it on the wall. I've got all these bells I got from the dollar store here, and I'm going to tie these little strings they came with and then attach them to the garland. I made these two little bows from ribbon I got at Dollar Tree, and I'm going to attach these to the garland as well. I got these two stockings for my husband and I at Walmart this year, and since they don't have our names on them anywhere, I thought it would be fun to make little stocking tags. I'm going to use these little wooden bell ornaments from Dollar Tree
and this spray paint to paint them gold. I did a couple of coats on either side and then let them dry before moving on to the next step. Now I'm writing our names on the ornaments, just using a black Sharpie. Next, I'm taking these wooden beads I got from Michael's and stringing them on some red and white twine. I'm then attaching the string to the ornament and then tying it onto the stocking. I'm now tying a couple of knots at the bottom so the beads don't fall off. Here's the finished stocking tag. It's super simple, but I thought since the stockings were such bright red that I would keep the tags more neutral. And with the added wooden beads, I think it just adds a nice little something special. For this DIY, I'm making a snowman out of a Dollar Tree mason jar and some white chalk paint from Folk Art, and I'm starting by covering the jar with the paint. For the snowman's nose, I'm using this scrap piece of orange vinyl and I'm cutting it into a triangle. You could also use felt or foam or a piece of paper, anything you have on hand. I don't want the nose to be totally flush against the mason jar, so instead of peeling off the vinyl and sticking it down, I'm putting a dot of hot glue on the left side, the larger end of the nose, and sticking it that way. And now I'm hot gluing two black buttons to the snowman. For the snowman's eyes, I'm using a piece of black foam and I'm cutting out two small circles. And then I'm hot gluing the circles onto the jar. For the snowman's scarf, I'm using this candy cane striped ribbon from Dollar Tree. I realized I didn't leave enough space for the scarf, so I took off the buttons and I'll be adding those back on. But I'm wrapping the ribbon around, then tying it and hot gluing it in place onto the jar. And now it's time to add those buttons back on. For the snowman's hat, I'm using this foam Christmas tree from a previous DIY video, and I'm tracing it on this piece of black foam and cutting it out. This is a little bit wider than the mason jar lid, which I am painting black with acrylic paint. That foam piece will become the base for the hat, so you'll see how this all comes together. I'm turning the mason jar upside down onto that foam circle and tracing it, then folding the foam in half and cutting a slit in the center, then cutting around the traced circle, giving me a black ring. This foam ring fits perfectly over top of the mason jar. This will be the brim of the hat. Now I'm screwing the lid back onto the jar, and I'm hot gluing this metal piece on top. You can see some of the white of the jar is showing through in the gap there, so I'm filling it in with black acrylic paint. You could also just paint the top of the jar black to begin with. I'm touching up the top with some paint, and my mason jar snowman is complete. Isn't he cute? I love how this turned out. For this DIY, I'm painting a Dollar Tree mason jar gold with this champagne gold color from Deco Art. This took a couple of coats to get the nice finish that I was going for. Once the paint has dried, I'm wrapping a piece of painter's tape around the jar. Then I'm covering the bottom half with decoupage glue. I have this ornament filler from Dollar Tree that is filled with gold and silver stars and glitter, and I'm sprinkling it all over the bottom part of the jar where the glue is. And it was right about this time I was questioning if this was a good idea or not, because a lot of it seemed to be falling off and not sticking super well, and I wasn't sure if the stars were too big for this project. But I kept going, kept sprinkling and placing some of the stars manually, but it actually does turn out really cute and does work, so stick with me here. But I'm covering as much of the bottom part of the jar as possible with all of the glitter and stars. Then I'm going over top of all of it with another layer of decoupage glue. This is really what is going to keep all of this in place and not having glitter falling everywhere, and especially keeping those larger stars in place. It's super important to put a nice layer of glue all over top of this. And the one I'm using is a glossy finish, so that is going to help with the nice sheen once all of it dries. You can see here it's giving a little bit of glossy, and it has a little bit of a sparkle to it with all of the glitter and the stars. So now it's time to take off the painter's tape. And again, I had a little bit of issue with this. It was taking off some of the paint along with it, but I just kept going, and then I'll touch up those bits with some more of the gold paint. And it's going to take a couple of layers to really cover up those holes, but it does work out. Now I'm going into Cricut Design Space to create a Merry Christmas decal. I found this SVG online, so I'm uploading it into Design Space. And I wasn't a big fan of these little stars that are around the design here, so I'm first resizing the image down to 2.5 inches wide to fit on my mason jar. Then I'm zooming it in here just to see better, and I'm manually deleting these little star designs just by clicking on all of them on the right hand side there, then pressing the delete button. Now instead, I'm going over to the sidebar here for where the shapes are and selecting the star, and I'm making it much smaller and dragging it over to the design. And if you hover over in the corner there, you can see kind of a rounded arrow, and that is how you rotate the images. So I'm duplicating this and adding stars to the other side, and doing the same rotating method by hovering on the outer corner and then dragging it around. And I'm continuing this by adding a bunch of little stars all over the design. Now I'm selecting the whole design and clicking on Attach to make everything the same color. It doesn't matter what color it's showing on here. You can select any color vinyl you want. I'm going with white and I'm cutting it out with my Cricut. At first I tried a silver color, but I felt like it didn't really show up very well against the gold paint. So I'm going with white instead, and it's really going to pop on the gold jar. I'm using a Duck brand contact paper as my transfer tape to transfer my design onto. And I'm making sure I'm getting all of those little bits weeded out. Yes, I did lose the dot of the eye in Christmas along the way, but that's okay. For these rounded projects like the jar, it really helps to stick the middle of the design down first and then work your way on either edge, pressing it down carefully, then peeling off the transfer tape. To finish off this jar, I'm adding in some greenery, a gold glittery leaf, and some white florals. And this fancy glittery silver and gold mason jar is complete. Perfect for displaying this Christmas. For this DIY, I'm using a red and white snowflake napkin from Dollar Tree, along with a mason jar and some decoupage glue. I'm peeling off the top layer of the napkin. Then I'm cutting off this white section. So I'm just left with the snowflake design and red background. I'm covering my jar with the decoupage glue by painting the whole thing. And now I'm wrapping my napkin around the jar, pressing as carefully as I can, trying to smooth it down onto the jar. But of course, it does not have to be perfect. We're just trying not to rip it too much. Just being very gentle, pressing down onto the jar. And then I'll be cutting off the excess here. I'm also using some glue on the bottom just to gather it down there. And then I'm adding another layer of the decoupage glue all over the jar, covering the entire napkin. This is what the jar looks like once the glue has dried. I have this gold glittery ribbon from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to wrap the top of the mason jar with it. I'm adding some hot glue and then wrapping the ribbon around and securing it in place. I have these wooden snowflake decorations from Dollarama, and I'm taking one of the larger ones and painting it white. And now I'm hot gluing it to the front of my mason jar. To finish it off, I'm adding some Christmassy floral picks to the jar, including some red berries, a pine cone, and greenery. And my red and white Christmassy mason jar is complete.
Next, we're making a peekaboo snowflake mason jar.
For this DIY, I'm going into Cricut Design Space and clicking on Images, and I'm searching for a snowflake. I'm also filtering for the free images over on the left-hand side, and then scrolling through and seeing what I can find. I selected my snowflake, and now I'm going to add it to the canvas. I'm resizing it to be 2.5 inches wide. Then I'm clicking on Make It. I'm cutting out this design with my Cricut using white vinyl, but you can use any color vinyl because that part won't actually be part of our final project. I'm weeding it out, then using Duck brand contact paper as my transfer tape to transfer the design onto this mason jar. I'm using this glass paint from Deco Art in the shade Light Blue, and I'm covering the whole jar with it, also painting over the vinyl snowflake. This paint is pretty thin, so I'm doing several coats to cover it all. Now that the paint is all dry, I'm using my weeder tool to take off that vinyl snowflake. This part was a little bit tricky and I was taking some of the paint along with it, even though I was trying to be careful. But I do have to go back over and touch up a couple of the areas with some paint. Next, I'm taking this silver glittery ribbon from Dollar Tree and I'm wrapping it around the top of the mason jar, then hot gluing it in place. To finish off this DIY, I'm taking one of these little LED tea lights and popping it into the jar. You can see the flicker of the light shining through our peekaboo snowflake window. For this DIY, I'm painting a mason jar red with this paint from Deco Art in the shade Santa Red. I love this color. It is so festive and Christmassy, and I think it turns out really nicely on the jar. I'm going into Cricut Design Space and uploading this SVG that says a very Merry Christmas. And of course, first I'm resizing it so it fits onto the jar. I'm making it 2.5 inches wide. Then I'm selecting the whole design and clicking on Attach. And now I'm cutting out the design using white vinyl with my Cricut. After I weeded it out and transferred it onto the transfer tape, I'm pressing it onto the jar, starting with the middle and then pressing out on either side. Now I'm taking this red and white striped twine from Dollar Tree and I'm wrapping it around the top of the jar 3 times and hot gluing it in place. To finish it off, I'm adding in this Christmas pick from Dollar Tree, which is a bunch of greenery and red berries.
Next, we're making 2 different Dollar Tree Christmas gnomes, starting with this one. This little Christmas gnome is made with Dollar Tree socks and a mop head. To start with, I'm filling a tall gray sock with 2 cups of rice. I'm filling a measuring cup with the rice, then pulling the opening of the sock over top and pouring the rice inside. I'm tying the top of the sock into a knot and cutting off the top. I'm using this Dollar Tree mop head for the gnome's beard, and I'm pulling a bunch of the mop strands out and cutting them in half. I'll be using this wood bead for the nose, and I'm just lining it up on the sock to see where I want to place the beard. And now I'm gluing the curved mop head strands onto the sock in the formation of a beard. And now it's time to glue the bead down for the nose. To make the beard look more realistic, I'm unwinding each of the strands. I'm just pulling apart each strand, but if you wanted a fluffier looking beard, you could also brush through all the strands once you're finished unwinding them. I decided he needed a bit more stuffing, so I'm adding some more rice to the sock. And instead of tying the sock into a knot, I'm using an elastic band to tie it together. I thought the knot was just a little too big, so I like the look of the elastic much better. For the gnome's hat, I'm using this red and white striped sock. I'm folding the top of the sock down inside itself to hide the maple leaf, which is not very Christmassy. And now I'm pulling the sock on top of his head.
Before I glue down the hat, I'm adding a bell to the end of the hat with some red and white striped twine. I cut off the tip of the sock just because I didn't want that much gray showing, but the bell ends up covering most of the end anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I'm threading the twine through the bell and tying it in place, then tying that onto the end of the hat. I'm pulling the hat down. I want it to go right down to the top of the nose. To keep the hat in place, I'm pulling it down, then putting dabs of hot glue all around. I'm now trimming some excess fabric from the sock all around the bell, and now I'm giving our gnome a little beard trim. I wanted to add more detail to his hat, so I'm gluing on these little berries and greenery. My next Christmas gnome, I'm going to use a very similar technique to the mop head gnome, but this time I'm using wool for his beard. Again, I'm filling a tall gray sock with rice. I'm putting in about 2.5 cups into this sock right now, and then I'm tying off the top with an elastic band. To make the beard, I'm using this white yarn and I'm wrapping it around this box 50 times. This box is about 8 inches long. You could also use a piece of cardboard or anything else you have. Now that I've wrapped it around 50 times, I'm sliding the yarn off the box. I'm now taking another piece of yarn and tying it around this bundle of yarn to keep my loop in place. And now I'm cutting through one side of the loop. And this will be the bottom section of the beard. I'm arranging the yarn and the bead on the sock without gluing anything down yet, just to see where I want everything to go. I cut some more strands of yarn the same length, and I'm adding them above the nose for the mustache, and also to fill out the sides of the beard. And now it's time to glue everything down onto the sock. I thought he needed a bit more rice, so I'm adding that in now. The nice thing about the sock only being tied together with an elastic and not being glued or sewed shut is you can take out or add rice anytime before adding on the hat. It all depends on the shape and size of the gnome you're going for. Now for the hat, I'm using this sparkly red sock I found at Dollar Tree. I'm pulling it over his head. I'm tying the end of the hat off with some red and white twine, just like I did with the mop head gnome. But this time, instead of one large red bell, I'm tying on 2 small silver bells. I'm going to add more details to the hat, but first I'm gluing it in place with hot glue. Now for the side of the hat, I'm adding some leaves, greenery, and white berries, and I'm going to hot glue them all in place. Now I'm trimming the beard until it's the length and shape I want. For this DIY, we're making a big, beautiful Christmas wreath. First, I'm making the bow for the wreath. I have this beautiful ribbon with Christmas trees in different patterns. I'm unwinding the ribbon so there's about a 12-inch tail, then making my first loop and twisting it a couple times to keep it together. I'm making another loop slightly bigger than the first one, then giving it a couple twists. I'm making another loop the same size as the second one, and I'm taking it from the side with the ribbon roll, then putting the loop on the other side of the first loop. I'm continuing with this same pattern, creating loops on either side and making them slightly larger than the one before, and twisting each loop a couple times to keep it together. In total, I made 9 loops for my bow. Once it's done, I'm cutting the ribbon tail to be the same size as the other side. I'm weaving some floral wire through the bow and tying it in place to keep it all together. I'm cutting the ends of the ribbon into triangles to finish it off. Now I'm fluffing up all the loops and moving them around to form the bow. To make my burlap wreath, I'm taking a roll of burlap and attaching one end to my wire wreath form with floral wire. Fold the burlap in half and make a loop, then push it partway through the first ring of the wreath form, then push another loop of the burlap partway through the next section of the wreath, and again through the top section. I'm twisting the burlap a couple times, then continuing the same pattern, pushing a loop of burlap through each section of the wreath form. Once the whole wreath is covered with the burlap, cut it off and either tie it or glue it in place. Here is what the wreath looks like covered in burlap. These pine cones are very special because they're actually from my grandma's yard. She saved all the best ones for me to use in my DIYs, and I'm so excited to be using so many of them in today's video. I'm covering the edges of the pine cones with decoupage glue. You could use any white glue or Mod Podge. Then I'm sprinkling salt onto the pine cones. The glue will dry clear and the salt will give a nice light snowy look on the pine cones. I'm taking these Christmas picks I had left over from Christmas time last year. I believe they were from Dollar Tree, and I'm adding them onto my wreath, attaching them with floral wire. Next, I'm figuring out where I want to place my pine cones. I'm using 5 for this project, and I'll be hot gluing them in place. I also have these real evergreen branches I collected, and I'm adding them to the wreath, just poking them through and arranging it among the burlap. These berries are from Dollarama, and I'm taking off a few of them to add to my wreath. This DIY is a hanging kissing ball. I'm using this styrofoam ball, which was 50 cents at the thrift store. You can also use a floral foam ball. You'll see I made a hook with the floral wire, but I do not recommend doing this if you're using a styrofoam ball because it was very difficult to get the wire through, and I ended up not using it anyway. I have all of these evergreen tree branches, and I'm using 11 pine cones for this project. I'm hot gluing all the pine cones around the styrofoam ball. I'm now hot gluing the greenery onto the ball around the pine cones. I'm taking this jute cord and wrapping it around the ball and tying it together at the top. I'll be using this to hang the kissing ball. I'm cutting off some berries from this berry pick and I'm sticking them into the kissing ball. You could also glue them in place if you wanted to. I want to tame this a little bit, so I'm going around and trimming the branches into a bit more of a rounded shape. I definitely should have done this before gluing the pine cones onto the ball, but now I'm adding a snowy effect by painting decoupage glue onto the edges, then sprinkling salt on top. I'm also adding a bit of the glue to some of the berries to create the snowy effect on those as well. This DIY is a lantern centerpiece or mantle decor. Had this lantern for many years and I'm giving it a Christmas makeover. I'm adding 3 pine cones inside the lantern, starting with the largest at the bottom and the smallest on the top. I'm cutting up these evergreen branches and adding them into the lantern, mostly behind the pine cones with a couple in front and beside. I'm cutting off pieces of this berry pick and adding them into the lantern. The ribbon is left over from last Christmas, and I'm creating a bow for the top of the lantern. First, I'm creating a loop the size I want the bow to be, and I'm cutting the ribbon, leaving a bit extra so it can overlap and be glued together. I cut another piece of ribbon slightly smaller than the first one, and I'm gluing it together to create a loop. Now I'm gluing the smaller loop on top of the larger loop. I'm pinching the middle of the bow together and keeping it in place with floral wire. I'm fluffing up the loops of the bow, and now I'm making the ribbon tails. Since this ribbon is pretty wide, I'm folding each of the two pieces in half and gluing them together. And now I'm gluing the ribbon tails to the main part of the bow. This is the finished little bow, which I think is so cute, and I'm gluing it to the top of the lantern. This DIY is a pine cone tree. For this DIY, I'm using 3 pine cones, and I'm peeling off each of the pine cone pieces. What I should have done right away, but I did do eventually, after getting a few pine cone cuts, is cut off all the sharp bits of the pine cone with scissors. To make the tree, I'm using an empty cracker box. I'm cutting off the tabs of the box, then cutting the box in half. I'm rolling this piece of cardboard into a cone shape and hot gluing it in place. Now I'm cutting off the bottom of the cone so it'll sit flat on the table. Here is the finished cone along with our stash of pine cone pieces. Now it's time to hot glue all the pine cone pieces onto the cardboard cone. I'm placing the largest pieces on the bottom of the cone and saving the smaller pieces for the top. For the bottom row, I'm gluing each piece next to each other all around, slightly hanging off the bottom edge. For all the subsequent rows, focus the glue more on the top of the pine cone piece, pressing the top onto the cardboard cone, slightly overlapping the previous row. When I first tried this, I was gluing the second row of pieces onto the previous row, not touching the cone, and I quickly realized that was not going to work. If your pine cone pieces are not touching the cardboard cone, then your tree is going to keep getting wider and wider, and it just won't look very nice and won't work as your tree. When you get to the top of the tree, try to line up all the little pieces so they're coming to a point. Once I covered the whole cone with pine cone pieces, I noticed there were a couple of places that seemed like they were a little bit lacking, so I'm adding some of my leftover pine cone pieces into those areas with hot glue. This DIY is a pretty little pine cone display. I'm trimming off all the spiky bits of the pine cone with scissors to make it easier to handle the pine cones. I'm using this metallic paint in the color Champagne Gold by DecoArt. I'm painting all the edges of the pine cones with the gold paint. I have these wood beads and I'm using 12 of them, 6 for each pine cone. I'm threading all the beads onto a skewer. I find this is the easiest way to paint wood beads, especially this size, which fits perfectly onto the skewer and they don't move around while painting. I'm painting all the beads white with a white acrylic paint. I have this glitter dust paint from DecoArt in the shade Ice Crystal, and I'm adding a layer of this over top of the white paint on the wood beads. This gives a very slight shimmer and sparkle to the beads. I'm adding the beads to 2 of the 3 pine cones, and I'm just pushing them into place, but you could of course also use hot glue just to make it all more secure. This DIY is a Christmas mason jar sign. I'm starting with this wooden mason jar from Dollar Tree. I'm taking off this twine bow on the top. I'm starting by painting the top and sides of the mason jar with red acrylic paint. I have this red and black buffalo check vinyl from Dollar Tree, and I'm cutting it out the same size as the mason jar. Then I'm going to stick it onto the sign. I got a pack of Christmas-themed felt words at Dollar Tree, and I'm using this one in white that says joy for this sign. I'm just hot gluing it onto the mason jar. These Christmas stickers are also from Dollar Tree. I'm using 2 of the trees for this DIY, and I'm painting them green with this green acrylic paint by DecoArt in the shade Holly Green. I thought the trees needed a little something else, so I'm using white acrylic paint and adding little dots on the trees. I have this small craft stick painted red with some Christmas berries on it. It was part of a DIY I did last year, and I'm using it at the top of my mason jar for a little decoration. I'm stringing 3 silver bells onto a strand of red and white baker's twine and tying it around the craft stick. Then I'm hot gluing this onto the top of the mason jar. I'm hot gluing the second tree sticker overlapping the first one so it gives it more of a 3-dimensional look. I'm adding some line detail in black to the top of the mason jar to give it a bit more of a realistic look. I'm taking some pieces of twine and tying 2 bows, then hot gluing them together and gluing that to the top of the mason jar. This DIY is a Christmas wreath, and I'm starting by using this wreath. I believe it was from Dollar Tree last year. It's just a metal wreath form with garland tied around it. And I'm also using a piece of cardboard and this galvanized joy sign from Dollar Tree. I'm going to cut out a strip of cardboard to go across my wreath. Now I'm cutting that cardboard piece out. And I'm taking this red and black buffalo check vinyl from Dollar Tree and cutting it to be the same size as my cardboard rectangle, then sticking it on top. I'm hot gluing this cardboard piece to the back of my wreath, and then I'm hot gluing this joy sign right in the middle. I'm taking this decoupage glue from DecoArt along with some salt, and I'm painting all over my garland wreath with this decoupage glue and then sprinkling the salt on top to create a snowy effect. I did end up going back over some of the places and adding more glue and more salt because once the glue dried, I could see better which parts needed more snow. I have these 2 wooden bells from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to paint them with this bright metallic paint from DecoArt in the shade Champagne Gold. For the top of my wreath, I'm going to add a couple of these small pine cones, and I'm doing the same effect, going over them with the decoupage glue and then sprinkling lots of salt on top to make them all nice and snowy. I'm hot gluing these to the top of my wreath and also adding in some white and red berries in the middle. I'm hot gluing the 2 wooden bells together at a bit of an angle so the 2 holes at the top are overlapping. And then I'm taking this bundle of red berries and poking it through the hole and then gluing all of this to the bottom of the wreath. Now I'm decorating the rest of my wreath with a couple little pine cones and then some of the Christmas berries. I have this pack of decorative filler that has lots of mini pine cones and other things in here, and I'm taking some of these out and hot gluing them around the wreath. This DIY is a cute little jingle bell wreath ornament. I have this floral wire from Michaels, and I'm cutting off a about an 11-inch section of it. I'm using 34 bells for this ornament, a mixture of smaller ones and slightly larger ones. They all came from Dollar Tree, and I'm weaving them onto my floral wire, alternating between a smaller bell and a larger bell. I got this idea from Frugal Family Homes blog, and I thought it was so cute that I had to recreate it. By alternating the bells from smaller to larger, you can see they kind of all go together and end up beside each other, and it ends up looking really full and nice. Depending on how large you want the ornament to be, or if you want it to be a wall hanging, you just make your floral wire longer and add more bells. I'm twisting the two ends of the floral wire together a few times and wrapping them around, just making sure it's really secure. And then I'm cutting off the excess. I have this red ribbon with white snowflakes on it from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to make a bow for the top of my wreath ornament. I'm cutting off a little section and making a loop, and this is going to be how wide I want the bow to be. And then I'm hot gluing the loop together. Then I'm cutting off another piece of ribbon, slightly smaller, and making another loop, then hot gluing that on top of the first loop. And because this ribbon isn't wired, it's a little trickier to mold it into the shape that you want it to be. So I'm using hot glue and adding little dots of it in the middle and between the sections, then pinching the ribbon together until I get the shape of bow that I want. Now I'm cutting off 2 more pieces of the ribbon for the tails of the bow. I'm hot gluing my bow to the bell wreath. I thought it was kind of missing something, so I'm taking one of these little white berries and hot gluing it to the center of the bow. Then I'm using this red and white baker's twine, and I'm making a loop to hang the ornament on the tree. Next up is this wood round Christmas sign. I'm using this wood round sign from Dollar Tree. I'm staining it with this oak gel stain from DecoArt. I'm painting on the stain, then spreading it around with a cloth. I'm covering the whole sign with this wood stain, even though we are going to be covering up some of it with paint, but I wasn't sure exactly where the lines would be, so I thought it would just be easier to cover the whole thing. I really like how this stain looks on the wood round. I think it's looking so much more high-end already. I'm creating my vinyl stickers in Cricut Design Space. I added a circle the same size as my sign and 2 lines as a guide for how big to make the words. Christmas is in the font Hello Honey from dafont.com, and the Have Yourself a Merry Little part is in the Arial Narrow font. I deleted the circle and the lines, then cut out the words on my Cricut. I'm adding 2 strips of painter's tape to the sign. I'm using this black chalk paint, and I'm painting the sign above the top piece of tape and below the second piece of tape. At this point, I was kind of regretting adding the black paint because I thought the wood stain looked so good, and I was really worried I was ruining it by painting over it with black. I was committed though, so I kept going, and I'm glad I did because I think this sign ends up turning out so nice. So just have to stick with me here. Now that the paint is dry, I'm peeling off the painter's tape. The lines ended up really crisp, looking so good, which I am so happy about. Now I'm adding the decals onto the sign, placing the Christmas vinyl onto the wood stain part, then the Have Yourself a Merry Little vinyl onto the black section just above Christmas. It can be really tricky peeling off the clear transfer paper from these cursive letters, so you just have to go slowly and use one of the Cricut scraper tools to hold down the letters and just peel one at a time. I have this black, red, and white ribbon from Walmart, and I'm going to make a large bow for the top of the sign. I'm unraveling the ribbon to make a tail on the end, then creating a loop at the top.
This will be the center of the bow. Then I'm creating 2 more loops, slightly bigger than the first one, and I'm putting them on either side of the first loop and twisting them each a couple of times. Then I'm repeating this process with 2 more loops, slightly larger than the previous 2. I'm tying the bow all together with floral wire, and I'm also holding it in place with some hot glue. I'm cutting the other end of the ribbon to create the second tail. Before I secure the bow to the sign, I'm adding these evergreen picks from Dollar Tree. They come in a pack of 6, and I'm using all 6 for this sign, arranging them in a crisscross fashion, then hot gluing them in place. Now I'm hot gluing my bow to the top of the sign, then trimming the ends of it so they don't cover up the words. DIY Christmas countdown sign. I'm using this stretched canvas from Dollar Tree, and I'm cutting off the canvas from the frame, then trimming the canvas. I'm sanding the frame, and I'm staining it with this oak gel stain. When I made this project, it was actually my first time using the stain, and I didn't know how much to put on. I didn't realize you don't need to put on this much, just brush on some of it, then wipe it with a cloth. I'm creating the Christmas countdown in Cricut Design Space. The word Christmas is in the Halloween Dreams script font, and the word countdown is in the Magical Mystery font, both from dafont.com. I'm ungrouping the word Christmas and deleting the letter I. Now I'm inserting a Christmas tree SVG and putting it in the place of the I. I made a rectangle the size of the canvas to give me an idea how big I want to make my design. I'm adding the numbers 1 to 24 along with an SVG of Santa and his reindeer. I used the slice tool to make Christmas countdown into 2 stencils because I'll be painting them on the canvas. I cut everything out and now I'm weeding it and sticking them onto the canvas. Red acrylic paint from Dollar Tree and a green paint from Deco Art to paint the word Christmas on the canvas. I actually do not recommend you do this part if you recreate this. The reason I made it into a stencil is because I didn't have the colors of vinyl that I wanted the words to be. However, you will see the lines are not very crisp from the paint and I end up having to fix it. If you have red and green vinyl, I definitely recommend using that instead. Here you can see it doesn't really look the best, so I'm going over all the edges of the letters with a red fine liner pen, and this cleans it up and makes it look so much better. I'm doing the same thing with Countdown, going over the outline with a green fine liner. Another thing I will say is if you do go the painting route, be patient while it dries and be careful not to smudge. I did have a couple smudges from the paint near the top of the sign, which were kind of hard to fix. I did cover a lot of it up with the frame, but that's just another reason I recommend using vinyl for the letters. I'm sticking the December calendar to the canvas. I'm trimming the canvas down even more. I laid the frame down on top as a guide to figure out how much I needed to cut off. For our daily marker, I'm making a mini wreath out of this pipe cleaner garland and a few berries from this berry garland. To start, I'm making a circle out of floral wire. Then I'm wrapping the pipe cleaner around the wire. This wasn't a regular pipe cleaner with the wire inside. It was a lot more flimsy, so it was really easy to wrap around the floral wire. But if you're using regular pipe cleaner, you could probably even skip the floral wire part. I'm hot gluing the ends in place, then adding a couple of red berries to the wreath. I'm taking this red and white string and I'm tying a bow to add to the bottom of the wreath.
Now I'm hot gluing the frame to the canvas. I added a push pin above the number 1, then hung the wreath on it. Every day in December, I'll move the pin over and hang the wreath on the next day. DIY is a beautiful nativity themed sign. I'm using this rectangular sign from Dollar Tree, and to fill in the 2 holes, I'm using a mixture of white craft glue and baking soda. I mixed a bit of it together in a container to create a paste. Then I used a craft stick to push it into the holes and smooth it over and let it dry. To create a nice wood effect on the sign, I'm using white acrylic paint along with the shade Country Twill from Plaid. I'm squeezing lines of each color of paint on the sign in the direction I want the wood grain to go, alternating between the white and the beige. Now I'm brushing out the paint with a paintbrush, blending the 2 colors together in between. You want to go slowly with this, blending and adding paint as needed. I switched paintbrushes a couple of times so I'd have a clean one to work with, because I didn't want the colors to totally blend together, but I wanted it to have some dimension like with the base. I'm going in with burnt umber paint from Dollar Tree, and I'm adding a bit over top, again painting in the same direction. This is where it starts to look a little crazy, but once you get it all blended, it's gonna look so nice. Free Nativity SVG online. I'm arranging it on a rectangle the same size as my sign. For some reason, the stars from the SVG turned into little pentagons when I inserted it into the project, so I'm deleting those and inserting my own stars using the Cricut shapes. I'm also deleting the words Silent Night and Holy Night, and I'll be replacing those later. In the Etsy version of the sign, the wise men were on the left and the shepherds were on the right, so I'm flipping these images and putting them on the other side. I'm also moving each image a little further away from each other, so the whole thing is not so squished. I deleted the angel, and I'm adding back in Silent Night and Holy Night using the font Good Cream from dafont.com. I cut out the design in 3 parts, the shepherds and the animals together, the wise men and the camel, and the manger. Now I'm arranging them on the sign to see where I want them all to go. I'm using transfer tape to stick the designs onto the sign. DIY is a simple Christmas wire wreath. I have this metal wreath form from Dollar Tree. This was one of the rings from the 3-ring wreaths. I'm painting it gold with this gold glass paint from Deco Art. You could also spray paint it gold, but it was a little cold outside, so I decided to just paint it by hand instead. Now that the wreath is painted, it's time to add the embellishments. All of these Christmas picks are from Dollar Tree, and the berries are from Dollarama. I'm arranging them along the bottom of the wreath, and I'm attaching everything with floral wire. I'm also using hot glue in some areas to keep things in place. I'm using this red ribbon from Dollar Tree to make a small bow at the bottom of the wreath. I just tied it into a bow, and I'm hot gluing it to the greenery. DIY is a round Christmas ornament, and I'm taking a styrofoam ball along with some twine and hot gluing the twine all around the entire ball. I'm starting at the bottom and then wrapping it around in a circle around the entire styrofoam ball until it's all covered in twine. Here's what the ball looks like, all covered in the twine. I also trimmed off some of the excess little pieces that were sticking out all over it. I'm using these pearl beads to decorate my Christmas ornament. I'm taking a bunch of the larger white ones first and hot gluing them around the styrofoam ball. Then I'm also adding in some of the other sizes, a medium-sized rose gold one, and then a tiny little copper colored one. I'm taking this burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree and taking off just the white lace part. And once I have a piece of the lace removed, I'm cutting it in half. I'm making a small loop at the end of each of the lace pieces and then hot gluing them to the top of the ball to make a bow. I cut off a piece of twine and I'm tying a knot at the end and then gluing it to the top of the Christmas ornament. For this DIY, we're going to make a Christmas angel ornament. Starting with a piece of thin white cardstock, I'm rolling from one of the corners to make a cone shape. Then I'm cutting it and hot gluing it together so it forms a nice cone that can stand up on its own. Now I'm trimming off the bottom to make the cone a bit smaller. Using my hot glue gun, I'm wrapping the twine all around the cone and covering the entire thing. Now that the twine is wrapped all the way around the cone, I'm cutting off the end and hot gluing it on the inside of the cone. I have this tiny little styrofoam ball I'm using for the head of the angel. And of course, to start with, I'm wrapping the whole thing in twine. Starting at one end of the ball, I'm wrapping the twine around in circles until the whole ball is covered. Now that I'm at the end, I'm cutting off the twine, then hot gluing it to the bottom of the styrofoam ball. To make the wings of the angel, I'm placing the cone body onto a piece of cardboard, then drawing out half of a heart shape, roughly about how big I want the wings to be. Then I'm tracing this part onto the cardboard and cutting it out to make sure both of the wings are the same size. Now I'm hot gluing twine around each of the wings. Now it's time to put all the pieces of the angel together. I'm starting by hot gluing the head onto the top of the body. Then I'm trimming down the wings a little bit before hot gluing them to the back of the angel. I'm using this cream colored lace ribbon to add some trim to the bottom of the angel's dress. And I actually end up changing this to more of a pure white lace in a minute. But I'm cutting it to be the size that I want and then hot gluing it at the back of the angel. And I'm doing the same thing to add a headpiece. I'm taking a piece of silver sparkly string and wrapping it around the angel's neck to create kind of like a necklace. I'm crossing the two ends over each other, then placing a little bit of hot glue in the center and attaching them in place. Then I'm adding 3 little beads to the center. Now I'm cutting off a piece of twine and gluing it to the back of the angel so I can hang it on the Christmas tree. I didn't end up really liking how the cream lace was looking on here. I thought the white lace would look nicer, so I'm taking off the headpiece and the trim at the bottom of the skirt and replacing them with pieces of pure white lace ribbon. This DIY is a twine Christmas tree ornament. I'm starting by drawing out a triangle on a piece of cardboard, then cutting it out. I'm now taking some twine and hot gluing it all around this triangle, wrapping it around until the whole tree is covered. Now that I'm finished wrapping all the twine, I'm taking this white lace ribbon and adding it to the bottom of the Christmas tree. I have this little piece of greenery with a mini pine cone and some red berries that I'm adding to the bottom corner of the tree. I don't love how fake and plasticky this little pine cone is looking, so I'm taking it off and replacing it with another mini faux pine cone that looks a lot more realistic. Now I'm adding another little dollop of hot glue to the top of the tree and adding a white pearl bead. For the last step, I'm cutting off a piece of twine and making it into a loop, then hot gluing it to the back of the ornament. This DIY is a Let It Snow sign. I'm using this round Valentine's sign from Dollar Tree, along with the Let It Snow page from this Dollar Tree calendar. To start with, I'm painting the sign with white chalk paint from Folk Art. I'm now cutting out the Let It Snow page to fit onto the round sign. Now I'm attaching the calendar page to the sign with a glue stick. I have this gold wired ribbon from Dollar Tree and I'm making a bow for the bottom of the sign. I'm making several loops, then keeping them in place using hot glue. For something a little extra, I'm adding these red berries to the sign. Once I have them all arranged the way I want them, I'm hot gluing them in place. I'm also adding these mini pine cones below the red berries along with some white berries. DIY is a Merry Christmas Y'all sign. I'm using this Dollar Tree calendar page for this DIY, and I'm cutting around the mason jar shape. For this DIY, I'm using this rectangular love sign from Dollar Tree. It is covered in glitter, so I'm sanding it all off before painting it, and I'm also sanding the frame of the sign. I'm using this white chalk paint and painting over the sign. To give it a bit of a more rustic farmhouse look, I'm taking this country twill paint from Folk Art and lightly dry brushing over top of the white paint. Now I'm going in with some white acrylic paint just to soften it and blend all the colors together. Now I'm painting over the frame part of the sign with this acrylic paint from Deco Art in the shade Raw Sienna. And now I'm gluing the mason jar onto the sign. This DIY is a cutting board Merry Christmas sign. I'm using this cutting board sign from Dollar Tree and painting it with country twill paint from Folk Art. I'm now going over the cutting board with white paint, doing light strokes, but a lot of them. Now I'm going back over top with the same country twill paint I used before, just to blend everything together. For this DIY, I'm using this Dollar Tree farmhouse calendar, turning to the Merry Christmas page. I'm cutting out the jar and greenery, then gluing it onto the sign. Now I'm taking this thin gold ribbon and making a bow for the bottom of the sign. I'm making 3 loops on either side of the bow, along with another loop in the center. This DIY is a Happy Holidays frame with a poinsettia. I'm using the Happy Holidays page from this Farmers Market Dollar Tree calendar. I have this picture frame, which I believe was from Dollar Tree a while ago, and I'm tracing the glass from the frame onto the calendar page, then cutting it out. Now I'm putting the frame back together with the calendar page inside. These little pine cone and berry bunches are off of different Dollar Tree Christmas ornaments, and I'm adding them to the frame using hot glue. This DIY is a snowy Christmas tree farm sign. For this DIY, I'm using the Farm Fresh calendar from Dollar Tree, and I'll be using the Farm Fresh Christmas tree page. I'm starting by cutting off the Farm Fresh section at the top of the page because this will not fit onto my sign. I'll be using this rectangular sign from Dollar Tree. This was used as part of a previous DIY, which is why it's looking a little beat up. I'm starting off by sanding down the whole sign. Now I'm gluing the calendar page onto the sign. I'm painting the edges of the sign that the calendar page doesn't cover with white chalk paint. To give it a more rustic look, I'm taking some brown paint and lightly dry brushing over the white edges. Then I'm going over top with some white acrylic paint to blend it all together and make the edges look a little less harsh. This roll of faux fur was from Dollarama, and I'm using it to make a 3D snowy scene with these trees from Dollar Tree. First, I'm hot gluing a larger and a smaller tree to the bottom left corner of the sign. Then I'm trimming down the faux fur and gluing it to the trees to make it look like snow. I'm also adding a thin strip of the fur along the bottom of the sign and onto the right, and I'm hot gluing some red berries underneath the snow on the right-hand side. The first cinnamon stick Christmas ornament DIY is going to be a little mini Christmas tree. I'm taking 3 cinnamon sticks and arranging them in a triangle. Then another stick I'm cutting to make the trunk of the tree. And now I'm hot gluing all the pieces together. I'm hot gluing a little mini silver bell from Dollar Tree to the top of my Christmas tree. And to decorate the tree, I'm using this gold berry garland from Dollar Tree, and I cut off a section of it and I'm weaving it around the Christmas tree. Once I have the garland wrapped around the whole tree and glued in place, I'm adjusting all the little berries so you can see them. And to finish it off, I cut off a piece of twine and I'm hot gluing it to the back for the ornament hanger. Cinnamon stick Christmas ornament is a mini stable. I'm using 5 cinnamon sticks, 2 to form the peak at the top, 2 for the sides, and 1 for the bottom. And of course, I'm hot gluing everything together. I have this glittery gold star from Dollar Tree, and I'm hot gluing it to the top of the stable. And lastly, I'm taking a piece of twine and hot gluing it to the back. The next cinnamon stick Christmas ornament is a reindeer, and for this one I'm using 3 cinnamon sticks and arranging it in an upside down triangle, and I'm hot gluing all the pieces together. I have these little red berries from a previous dollar store garland, and I'm cutting off one of them for the red nose of Rudolph, and I'm hot gluing it to the point of the triangle. For the antlers, I'm using a brown pipe cleaner, and I'm cutting it off into 2 smaller pieces and then making sort of a bend in the pipe cleaner for the antler shape. Then I'm hot gluing the antlers to the reindeer head. For the reindeer's eyes, I'm using a piece of white felt and cutting out 2 small circles. Then I'm hot gluing those circles to the top cinnamon stick piece. And for the eyeballs, I'm just using a black pen and drawing them in. For the ornament hanger, I'm using this red and white candy cane striped ribbon from Dollar Tree. And I'm folding it over a few times and hot gluing it, then placing it on the back of the ornament. The next cinnamon stick Christmas ornament is just going to be a decorative triangle. So of course I'm using 3 cinnamon sticks for this, and I'm hot gluing them all together. For the decorations, I'm using this garland from Dollar Tree, and I'm cutting off a little piece of it and hot gluing it to the bottom right corner of the triangle. Then I'm taking some of these little red berries and arranging them onto the greenery and hot gluing those in place. For the ornament hanger, I'm using this red and white baker's twine from Dollar Tree and hot gluing it to the top of the ornament. The next cinnamon stick Christmas ornament is going to be a mini Christmas tree. And this time I'm using multiple cinnamon sticks stacked on top of each other, getting smaller and smaller as we get towards the top of the tree. First, I arranged how many cinnamon sticks I wanted to create the tree. Then I'm going in and trimming them down one by one, getting smaller and smaller. I also cut an even smaller piece of cinnamon stick to create the trunk of the tree, and now I'm hot gluing all the pieces together. To decorate my tree, I'm using this pipe cleaner garland from Dollar Tree. They're kind of like pipe cleaners, but they're not sturdy like a regular pipe cleaner. And I'm tying little knots in them, then cutting it off to create kind of like a little mini pom-pom. And I'm hot gluing a few of them all over the tree. While I'm doing that, I also decided I wanted something a little extra at the top of the tree. So I cut a teeny tiny cinnamon stick piece sticking vertically at the top for like a little tree topper. At the very top of that small cinnamon stick piece, I'm hot gluing a white pearl bead. For my ornament hanger, I'm using this red ribbon from Dollar Tree. I love this ribbon because it's kind of see-through, and I'm creating a loop and hot gluing it to the top. The next cinnamon stick Christmas ornament is a mini sled. For this ornament, I'm using 5 cinnamon sticks, 4 for the base of the sled, 2 in the center that are slightly higher up, and then the 2 on the sides are a little bit lower down, and then another cinnamon stick across the top horizontally. I'm hot gluing all of these pieces together. For some little decoration on the sled, I'm using these little beads from Dollar Tree. The slightly bigger ones are a silver color, and then the teeny ones are sort of a purpley metallic. And I'm alternating between the two, placing them on that top piece of the sled. And for the ornament hanger, I'm using this red and white baker's twine and hot gluing it to the back. This DIY is a felt loop mini Christmas tree. To make the Christmas tree, I'm using an old cardboard box and I'm cutting off all the tabs on the side. Then I'm cutting this box in half and I'll be making 2 trees out of it. I'm rolling this section of cardboard into a cone shape, then hot gluing it in place. Now I'm trimming off the bottom so my tree can stand up straight. I have this piece of white felt and first I'm covering the entire cone with it. So I'm hot gluing that all around the cardboard. I'm now taking another sheet of white felt and I'm folding it in half, then cutting slits from the folded edge up to the open part, but not all the way through, leaving a bit at the top. And each of my sections is maybe about 1 inch or so wide. Once all the slits are cut, I'm left with this felt fringe, and I'm wrapping that around the bottom of my tree. Now that I can see how much of the felt I need, I'm trimming off the excess, and I'll use this for the next layer. Now I'm adding the next layer of the felt loops a little bit higher up on the tree. Here I'm taking another piece of the felt and folding it around my tree to see how big of a piece I need. And I'm doing the same thing as before, cutting those slits starting from the folded edge of the felt up towards the open part, but not going all the way through. I'm continuing to add more layers of my felt loops all the way to the top of the cone, hot gluing them all in place. Now that my final loop layer is on there, I'm hot gluing so the felt comes to a bit of a point on the top of the tree. This DIY is a fuzzy white Christmas tree. I'm folding this piece of cardboard into a cone shape, then hot gluing it together. I got this roll of fuzzy white material from Dollarama, and I'm going to wrap it around the cone to make this fuzzy Christmas tree. I'm starting at the top, then wrapping it around diagonally down the tree, hot gluing as I go, and trimming off the excess. You could add all kinds of embellishments to this if you wanted, like little pearls or beads, or even greenery and berries. I decided just to leave it as is for the snowy white look. This DIY is a 3-dimensional green Christmas tree. I got these foam Christmas trees from Dollar Tree, but if you can't find these, you could always just use green foam and cut them into the shape of trees. I'm putting a line of hot glue down the center of my tree, then I'm adding a skewer to it. I'm also cutting off this little bottom section of all the trees. Next, I'm adding hot glue to the right section of my first tree, then putting another one of the foam trees on top and gluing it to that right side. I'm folding the second tree over to the right, then adding more hot glue on the right side again and adding another tree on top. I believe I used 5 trees total for this project. For the base of this DIY, I'm using one of these wood slices from Dollar Tree. And first I'm trimming my skewer down a little bit using scissors, then breaking it off. And now I'm hot gluing my skewer to the wood base. This DIY is a Christmas tree made with a bunch of different Christmas ribbons. To make the base of the tree, I'm rolling a cardboard box into a cone shape, then hot gluing it together. For this DIY, I'll be using these 3 Christmas ribbons from Dollar Tree. I'm measuring out sections of ribbon that are 3.5 inches long each. I'm adding a dot of hot glue to the top of one of the ribbon pieces, then folding it up to make a loop with the ribbon. Then I'm adding hot glue to the cone and sticking the ribbon loop onto the cone. And I'm alternating all the different ribbon patterns all around the tree, starting with the bottom layer. And I'm continuing this same pattern and process all the way up to the top of the tree. For the tree topper, I'm going to make a little bow using the ribbon pieces. I'm taking one of the snowflake ribbons and one of the candy cane style ribbons and making a loop out of each of them, then hot gluing them together. And then with the red ribbon, I'm using that as the tails of the bow. This DIY is a yarn Christmas tree decorated with pretty pearls. I got these 2 styrofoam cones from Dollar Tree, and then I have this yarn I got from Michael's, along with these pearl beads, also from the dollar store. To start off, I'm hot gluing all around the bottom of the cone and then attaching the yarn. And I'm continuing all around the cone, hot gluing as I go. I started off being pretty careful where I was putting the yarn as I was going around the cone, but then as time went on, I was a little less careful with it, which is totally okay because you can go back and add more layers of yarn over top of any of the blank spaces. And that's what I'm doing here, is just going over where I think I need to add more yarn and hot gluing it in place. Once I thought there was enough of this gray yarn on the cone, I took this lighter cream colored yarn and wove it around in sort of a diagonal pattern just to add a little more interest to the tree. And now I'm hot gluing these different sized pearls onto the tree. For the smaller cone, I'm taking the cream colored yarn and wrapping it all around and hot gluing it in place. And then I'll also be adding the same pearl beads onto the cone. This DIY is a white foam Christmas tree. I drew the shape of a leaf onto this piece of cardboard, and now I'm cutting it out and I'll use it as a template for all of my foam leaves. At first I thought I'd try to cut multiple leaves at once, so I'm folding the foam in half and then trying to cut around the cardboard leaf. But I didn't really like the way this was working. I found it kind of left these jagged edges. So instead what I did was traced this cardboard leaf all over the piece of foam, and then I cut out each individual leaf. This is definitely time consuming, but it's pretty easy to do. So just put on a TV show or a podcast and get tracing and cutting. I cut an entire sheet of foam into all the little leaves, and I ended up using almost all of them, although I did have a few left over. And now it's time to glue them all in place. For the bottom row, I left part of the leaf hanging down past the edge of the cone a little bit, and I'm gluing them all in a row beside each other. For all the subsequent rows, I'm layering the leaves on top of each other to give a nice 3D effect. Once I got to the top of the tree, I just arranged the leaves so they came to sort of a point at the top. This DIY is a vertical Oh Holy Night sign. This DIY, I'm using this rectangular wood sign from Dollar Tree with a star cut out at the top, and I'm painting it navy blue with this paint from Michaels in the shade Indigo. Now I'm going into Cricut Design Space and I'm adding in a rectangle that's the same size as my sign. So I'm adding in the square, then clicking on the lock button to unlock the dimensions there so I can make it into a rectangle. Now I'm adding in a star shape to the top of the rectangle. I did measure it to make sure it's roughly about the same size, but this is just to give me the visual when I'm adding my text onto the sign so I know how big to make everything. I found this Oh Holy Night SVG online and I'm adding it to my project. Now I'm changing my rectangle to a dark blue and I'm changing the star to white. I'm selecting the words Oh Holy Night and I'm changing them to white. I'm ungrouping everything because I want to delete some of these little stars and I want to be able to move everything around and spread it out a bit more. Now I'm ungrouping this bunch of stars and I'm going to manually place the ones that I want over on the sign. Now I want to add a little nativity scene at the bottom. So I'm going into my uploaded images and searching for nativity. This was an SVG I used last year in my Christmas DIYs. I'm ungrouping these and deleting everything except for the center manger. Then I'm changing that to white and moving it onto the rectangle. Now it's just a matter of rearranging and slightly adjusting things until everything looks right. I'm hiding the rectangle and the star since I don't need to cut those out. And I'm also selecting all of the stars and clicking on attach. Now this is popping up because my design is actually longer than 12 inches, which is the standard mat size. And I do not have one of the longer 24-inch mats. So I have to go back to my design, unattach the stars, and then attach them in smaller groups. So I'm attaching all of the bottom half of the stars together and attaching all of the upper half of the stars together. Now I'm clicking on Make It again, and I can see I have these 3 separate groups of stars. So I'm moving them slightly farther apart to make it easier for me to cut out. I'm using scissors to cut out the 3 sections of the stars before I weed them out. I laid everything on my sign to get an idea of where exactly I want them to go. Then I'm using transfer tape and sticking everything onto the sign. This DIY is a nativity-inspired Christmas sign. For this DIY, I'm using this Dollar Tree Christmas sign, and I'll be painting the back of it white with this white paint from Folk Art. I'm going into Cricut Design Space, and first I'm making the rectangle the same size as my sign and making that white. Now I'm creating my own little nativity manger scene, and I'm selecting the square shape and unlocking it. And now I can adjust it to whatever thickness and size I want. So I'm making 2 of these. And to start with, I'm just playing around with it and adjusting as I go, trying to see what exactly I want to do and how I want to make it. But once I get it nailed down, then I'm going to duplicate so each of the 2 lines are exactly the same. And I'm creating 2 more lines for the roof. I'm making this yellow just for visual purposes because I'm going to be cutting it out with gold vinyl. Now I'm going back to the shapes and selecting the star and putting that at the top of the manger. Now I'm adding some text. I'm typing out a verse from Luke, and I'm changing the font to PT Serif. I'm attaching the manger and the star together because I want to cut them just as they are. Now that I've cut this design out with my Cricut, I'm using Duck brand transfer tape and applying my design to it, then transferring it onto my sign. And I'm doing the same thing with the verse, sticking that to the sign underneath the manger. And you can see I had a little visitor with me while I was doing this part. The little letters were so small and fine, it took a lot of pressing down with my scraper tool to get it to stick onto the sign. So that part was very finicky, and I lost a lot of dots of eyes along the way that I had to re-put on there. This DIY is a nativity silhouette sign. For this DIY, I'm using one of these little archways from Dollar Tree, and I'm painting it black. I took a picture of the arch with my phone, and then I uploaded it and converted it to an SVG and erased the background and everything. Now I'm adding it into Design Space and adjusting it to be the proper size. And this is just to give me the visual for when I'm creating my project. I have all of these nativity themed SVGs I found online. So I'm adding in a Joseph and a Mary and a baby Jesus. I'm adjusting them, and now I can see what it's going to look like when I put it behind this arch. I'm playing around quite a bit, adjusting the size and seeing which parts I want to peek through each of the little windows. If any of them are overlapping at all, you want to make sure to weld them together. I chose to have them all a little bit separated, so I don't have to do that, but I am attaching them so they'll all just cut as is, and I can stick it on just like this. I'm tracing the arch onto a piece of white cardstock. This is actually the last page in a book of scrapbook paper, and I'm cutting it out. Now I'm transferring this silhouette of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus onto my transfer tape, then lining it up behind the frame to see how it looks, and then placing it onto this white cardstock. And I'm using my scraper tool to press it on here, and then I'm peeling off the transfer tape. I'm using hot glue to stick this onto the back of the arch. This DIY is a simple wood round sign. For this DIY, I'm using this Christmas sign from Dollar Tree, and I'm painting the back of it with this oak gel stain. Now I'm going into Cricut Design Space and adding in a circle the same size as the sign. I found this SVG online that says, "The thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices," which I thought was really nice, and I'm changing that to white. Now I don't want a lot of these extra things that are part of this SVG, but you can see on the right it's all one, so I can't just select each of the different elements. So what I'm going to do is click on Contour on the bottom right, and this pops up with all of the elements of the SVG. So if there's anything that I don't want, I just select it. And it's a little bit tricky to tell what you have and have not selected. When it's not going to be cut, it turns a lighter gray as opposed to the darker gray, but you can just exit out and see your design and see what you're working with. I'm adding in this poly border around the edge of the sign. I'm hiding the circle, then clicking on Make It. You can see everything is kind of a jumbled mess from the border. So I'm going back to the canvas, selecting everything and clicking on attach. Now when I click on make it, it's looking a lot better, and now I can just cut everything out like this. Now I'm lining up the design onto my sign, then pressing it down and peeling off the transfer tape. The next DIY is a big silver and blue deco mesh wreath. Starting off with this 18-inch wire wreath form. I got this one at Dollarama. And for this wreath, I'm using these two tubes of mesh, one in an icy blue and one in a sparkly white. Starting with the blue one, I'm measuring out a length of 25 inches per piece, then cutting it. And I'm holding down one end with a tape measure. You can use any kind of weight. And I'm folding the other end 2 or 3 times, then clipping it in place. Now I'm folding the other end about 4 times. Then I'm walking my fingers up to the other end of the mesh to create a bunched up bow. Now I'm taking a white pipe cleaner and tying the center of the bow together and taking off the clips. And this is our first mesh bow. For the white ones, I'm measuring out 23 inches because I wanted these bows to be a little bit smaller than the blue ones. And I'm doing the exact same method, folding one end of the mesh a few times, then clipping that in place, then turning it around, folding this end a few times, then walking my fingers to the other end, gathering the mesh as I go. I'm taking another pipe cleaner and tying the center of the bow. When I tied the pipe cleaners around the centers of these mesh bows, I left the ends sticking out so I can use these to tie the bows onto my wreath form. Now I'm going all around and attaching all the bows around the wreath. I'm tying the bows on the middle 2 rings of the wreath form. I ended up adding 17 blue mesh bows and 9 white bows. I added all the blue bows first since they are the main feature of my wreath. Then I went in and added white bows as accents throughout the wreath. Next, I'm using these 3 ribbons from Michaels, a snowflake ribbon, a sparkly blue ribbon, and a silver ribbon. I'll be using these to make more bows for the wreath. I'm cutting each of the ribbons into 10-inch strips. Each bow will have 2 strips of each ribbon color. I'm folding each ribbon piece in half and cutting the ends to make dovetails. I'm placing the blue ribbon on the bottom, then the snowflake ribbon, then the silver ribbon on top. And I'm hot gluing these 3 strips together by adding dots of hot glue in the center of each ribbon. Once I have 2 sections of 3 ribbons all glued together, I'm crisscrossing them and hot gluing them together. I made 5 ribbon bows and I'm attaching them to the wreath using pipe cleaners. Next, I'm taking this piece of wood I got from Michael's, and I'm making a sign for the center of the wreath. To start, I'm painting it white. I'm using this silver vinyl from Oracle, and I'm cutting out the words, "Let it snow," along with a couple of snowflakes with my Cricut. Now that it's all cut out, it's time to weed out my design. Using transfer tape, I'm transferring this "Let It Snow" design onto my wood sign. I added the sign to the center of the wreath, and my big deco mesh wreath is complete.
This DIY is a scene of a bunch of different mini Christmas trees. To start, I'm cutting a cardboard box into a triangle shape. Now I'm cutting out a piece of green felt the same size as my cardboard triangle. Once it's cut out, I'm hot gluing the felt onto the cardboard, pressing it in place. Now I'm trimming it down. To cover the back, I'm cutting a piece of white paper the same size as the triangle, then hot gluing it onto the cardboard. I'm cutting out another piece of cardboard using my green felt tree as a template. I'm going to cover the second tree with this festive fabric. This fabric has a burlap background and is covered in holly and gold accents. It is from Dollarama and it is so pretty, perfect for this time of year. I'm cutting out a triangular piece of the fabric, and I made this piece a little bit bigger than the cardboard triangle just so I could have two slightly different sizes of trees. Then I'm hot gluing the fabric to the cardboard. Now I'm cutting out a smaller cardboard triangle. I'm covering this third triangle with red felt, cutting it out to match the size of the cardboard, then hot gluing it in place. To make this tree a little more fun, I'm adding a layer of this sparkly red mesh from Dollar Tree. Since this mesh is see-through, I cut it to be larger than the triangle so I can fold it over the edges and hot glue it on the back. I have these little gold vase filler beads, and I'm going to add them to the green tree. Since the tree with the holly fabric has gold accents and the red tree is all sparkly, I thought the green tree needed a little extra something, and these little gold balls are the perfect addition. I'm hot gluing a bunch all over the tree. For the base of my Christmas tree scene, I'm using this large craft stick. I'm using this wood stain from Deco Art in the shade Walnut to paint the wood stick. I should have done this before painting, but I'm cutting off the ends of the craft stick because I didn't want the rounded edges. After I cut them off, I had to go back and paint the edges with the stain. I'm cutting out more pieces of white paper to add to the backs of the other trees. I have these 3 mini Jenga blocks from Dollar Tree that I previously painted dark brown. I'm hot gluing them to the backs of my cardboard trees to give them more support. Now I'm hot gluing my trees onto the base. I had glued a block to the red tree, but there wasn't quite enough space on the craft stick, so I ripped it off and just hot glued the tree by itself onto the stick in front of the other 2 trees. I'm hot gluing 2 tiny little pine cones to the right of my Christmas tree scene. I still felt like it was missing something, so I cut out another cardboard tree to add to the back. For this last tree, I'm cutting out a piece of white felt to match the size of the cardboard. I made this tree a little bit skinnier than the others to give it a bit of a different look. Now I'm gluing the felt onto the tree. I put the felt on both sides of this tree to cover the label on the back. Now I'm gluing the tree to the base behind the other trees. To make this one more stable, since I didn't have room for a Jenga block on the back, I'm gluing it to one of the little pine cones.
This DIY is a sheet music Christmas tree. I went online and searched for Christmas sheet music with lyrics for "Oh Christmas Tree." I found one, then printed it out. I'm folding the paper in half, just enough to see the crease down the middle, and I'm using a ruler to draw a triangle over the sheet music with a pencil. Then I'm cutting out my Christmas tree shape. I'm folding the triangle into an accordion, starting from the bottom, folding up, then turning it over and folding it again, repeating until I get to the top of the triangle. Using a pencil, I'm poking holes in each of the folds of the paper. I got a twig from outside and I'm weaving it through all of the holes of my Christmas tree. I thought the tree was looking a little bit too wide, so I'm trimming it down to make it a little thinner. I'm taking a rose gold bead and hot gluing it to the top of my Christmas tree. I'm trimming off the bottom of my stick a little bit, then hot gluing it to this small wood round. This DIY is a fun ribbon mini Christmas tree. I'm starting by hot gluing a wooden skewer to a small wood round. Then I'm adding 2 wooden beads onto the skewer. This Christmas plaid ribbon is from Michaels. You can use any ribbon, but wired ribbon is better for this project. I'm cutting a slit into the ribbon, then poking the skewer through it. Fold the ribbon back towards the skewer, then cut another slit into it and thread it onto the skewer. For this first section, I folded the ribbon over 4 times before adding another wooden bead. Then I'm carrying on folding over the ribbon and threading it onto the skewer. For the rest of the tree, I'm only folding it over 2 times before adding another bead. To make it look like a Christmas tree, I gradually made the ribbon folds smaller and smaller, working my way up. This way, the bottom is the widest and the top is the thinnest. Once you get to the top of where you want your Christmas tree to be, cut the ribbon. I'm tying this gold ribbon into a bow and I will add it to the tree. Since I didn't go up to the top of the skewer with my ribbon and beads, I'm cutting off the top. To help my bow lay more nicely, I'm using little dots of hot glue to press it down into place. Then I'm hot gluing the bow to the top of the tree. I want to keep the tails of the bow long, but I am trimming them a bit so they are even. This DIY is a mini yarn Christmas tree. I'm rolling a piece of cardstock into a cone shape. I'm taping the cone together, then trimming off the bottom so it can stand. I'm using this forest green yarn to make the Christmas tree. I added a bit of hot glue to the inside of the hole at the top of the cone, then stuck the end of the yarn into the glue. I'm wrapping the yarn around and around, going down the cone, adding bits of hot glue along the way. I added most of the glue to the back of the cone, trying not to put too much in the front. If you wanted to make sure the cone doesn't show through the yarn, you could either add multiple layers of yarn or you could use a dark colored cone. You could either paint it if you're using a styrofoam cone or use a different color of cardstock. To make the star for the top of the tree, I placed the tree onto a piece of cream cardstock. Then I'm lightly drawing a star shape to fit the top of the tree. I'm cutting out the star, then hot gluing it to the top of the tree. I have these little pearl stickers I'm going to use to decorate my tree. Here I'm just sticking them on, but I did end up hot gluing them because the tiny stickers weren't quite strong enough to really stick properly to the yarn. This DIY is a rustic burlap mini Christmas tree. First, I'm rolling a piece of cardboard into a cone, then cutting off the bottom and taping it in place. I'm using a roll of burlap and wrapping it around the bottom of the tree, then hot gluing it in place. I'm going to repeat this 2 more times, so I have 3 layers of burlap to create the tree. I wasn't really going for perfection with this tree. I wanted it to be more rustic and rugged looking, so I wasn't too careful with how I was placing the burlap on, just doing the 3 different layers, then hot gluing it all in the back. Now I'm hot gluing small wood beads to the tree. I started gluing them on randomly, but then I decided to do a bit of a pattern, placing them diagonally back and forth down the tree. This DIY is a super fun tassel Christmas tree sign. I started by painting a wood sign from Dollar Tree with this cream white paint. Then I'm taking this paint in the shade Country Twill and adding strokes across the sign. This helps to give the sign some dimension and look a little more interesting than just a plain solid color. Now to make the tassels for my Christmas tree. I'm cutting a rectangular piece of cardboard that is 2 inches wide and 4 inches long. I'm wrapping this dark green yarn around the cardboard piece 20 times. You can adjust this depending on how thick you want your tassel to be. Once I finish wrapping the yarn around the cardboard, I'm cutting it off. Make sure you cut the yarn so the end is on the same side of the cardboard as the start of the yarn, so the two ends are close together because we're going to tie them in a knot. Cut through one end of the tassel along the edge of the cardboard. Slide the yarn off the cardboard, then take another piece of yarn and tie it around the tassel, leaving about 1 inch on the top. The number of tassels you make will depend on the size of the sign you're using and the size of the Christmas tree you want to make, but I'm making 10 tassels in total. I'm arranging the tassels on the sign, starting with 4 on the bottom row, then 3, then 2, then 1 on top. I'm trimming the tassels as needed. Now that I know exactly where I want all the tassels to be, I'm hot gluing them all in place. This DIY is a joy sign with lots of pretty poinsettias. I'm using this 2024 Farm Life calendar from Dollar Tree, and I'm flipping to the December page. It has 3 mason jars, and it says joy with lots of red poinsettias. I'm cutting out this calendar page, and I'll be using this square sign from Dollar Tree. I'm just taking off the ribbon. Then I'm trimming off the bottom of this calendar page to even it up. Now I'm adding some hot glue all around the edges of the calendar page, then pressing it onto the sign and smoothing it down with my hands. To make this a little more interesting, I have this red felt, and using a pencil, I'm writing out the word joy. I have it over top of the calendar page so I can get a general idea of the size I want the letters to be. And I want to make sure that they cover up the letters that are already on there. So this is going to give it a really cool 3D effect and make it a little bit more fun than just the plain calendar page. Once I have all the letters written out, I'm cutting them with my scissors. I had to adjust the Y a couple of times because the Y I had drawn didn't quite cover up all of the little parts of the Y on the sign. So that is just something to watch out for. Now that I have all 3 letters cut out, I'm hot gluing them onto the calendar page. Continuing with this theme, I'm drawing out some flowers onto the red felt. I'm sketching out the petals, then I'm going to cut them out. I cut out a bunch of the flower shapes and I layered a couple of them on top of each other, so each flower had 2 pieces of red felt to make up the flower. For the centers of the flowers, I'm using this really dark green felt and cutting out some circles to hot glue to the centers. Once I have all the parts of the flowers cut out, I'm hot gluing everything together. Now I'm figuring out where exactly on the page I want my flowers to go, then hot gluing them in place. I have this pipe cleaner garland from Dollar Tree in the red and green, and I'm cutting out a piece that's long enough to go all the way around the edges of the sign. Then I'm hot gluing it in place. I cut out 2 more pieces of the pipe cleaner string, one in red and one in green, and I tied 2 little bows with them and then hot glued them on top of each other at the top of the sign. And now my Christmas joy sign is complete. I love how this turned out. I think the addition of the felt flowers and the letters really makes everything pop and stand out a lot better. This DIY is a Merry Christmas Y'all sign. This mason jar was cut out from a previous Dollar Tree calendar that I had used in another DIY. For this one, I'm not using the mason jar part of it, just the Merry Christmas Y'all. So I'm cutting that out. I'm using this cute little square sign from Dollar Tree that has the string of wood beads on the top. I'm using the back of the sign for this DIY, so to start with, I'm cutting off the string. I have this piece of scrapbook paper that is all Christmas themed with a red background and lots of Christmas trees, presents, and candy canes. And I'm cutting it out to be the same size as my sign. Using a glue stick, I'm sticking this piece of scrapbook paper onto the sign. Then I'm using the glue stick again to stick my Merry Christmas Y'all onto the scrapbook paper. This burlap trim is from Dollar Tree, and I'm unwinding it, then laying it out on the bottom of the sign and cutting off how much I need. And I'm going all around the sign and doing that for each of the 4 edges. Once all 4 pieces of the burlap trim are cut out, I'm hot gluing them in place onto the sign. I love how this burlap trim really frames the sign and I think finishes it off perfectly. Lastly, I'm adding my string of wood beads back to the top of the sign, but this time hot gluing them to the other side, which is now the back of the sign. And that completes my Merry Christmas Y'all sign. It's so small and cute, and I love the rustic farmhouse vibes. This DIY is a bright red joy sign. I'm using this locally grown 2024 calendar from Dollar Tree and turning to the December page with this beautiful wreath and the word joy in the center. To start with, I'm cutting out this calendar page. I'm using this sign from Dollar Tree, and on this one, the sides of the sign are raised up, so the center is recessed into the sign. I'm taking off the string on the top, and I'm using this paint in the shade Santa Red from Deco Art, and I'm painting the edges of the sign. I'm painting the front and the sides and also the inside of that frame. I'm cutting the calendar page so it goes into the sign. This was a little bit hard to measure. It'd be better if you used a ruler, but I just kind of eyeballed it a little bit and cut it a bit bigger than I thought was necessary and worked my way down from there. Here I'm cutting off the sides of this page. Then every so often I'm placing it into the sign to see how much more I need to cut off. And once I have the size just right, so it fits right inside there, I'm using a glue stick to glue it into the sign. Now I'm adding that string back to the top of the sign. To finish it off, I'm using this pretty white flower from Dollar Tree, and I took off the clip that was on the back and I'm hot gluing it to the top corner of the sign. And now this DIY is complete. I love how the red frame really brings out the berries in the calendar page, and I just think this one is so pretty for Christmas. This DIY is a little holly jolly Christmas house. I'm using this Beautiful Life 2024 calendar from Dollar Tree, and I'm flipping to the December page, which says Holly Jolly and has a big picture of Christmas holly. First, I'm cutting out the words Holly Jolly. Then I'm cutting out the holly separately. I'm cutting pretty closely around each of the designs, leaving just a small border. This little wooden house sign is from Dollar Tree. And first I'm taking off this small wreath that's on the front of the sign. I really like the black and red checkered part at the top here. So to go with that, I'm using a piece of red felt and I'm cutting it out to fit on the bottom of the sign. So I just have that checkered part peeking out on top. Now I'm hot gluing the felt to the sign. Now it's time to add my holly jolly and the holly to the house. First, I'm arranging it to make sure I know where I want each of them to go. Then I'm hot gluing them in place. To make the berries on the holly stand out more, I'm cutting out some more berries with my red felt, then hot gluing them over top of the ones already there. The berries that were on the holly I thought were a little bit too dark and hard to see. Now I'm taking some pretty green felt and I'm cutting out a strip to go along the bottom of the sign. I cut the strip that would fit along the bottom, then I'm adding some scalloping along the top just to make it a little bit more interesting. I was playing around with this quite a bit, adjusting the sizes and using my scissors to get it just right. And it wasn't perfectly even or anything, but I think it turned out pretty nice. Once that's done, I'm hot gluing it onto the sign. And here is the finished Holly Jolly Christmas house. This just screams Christmas colors, and I think it's so cute for the holidays. This DIY is a Merry Christmas ornament. I'm using this Every Moment Matters 2024 calendar from Dollar Tree. And I'm flipping to the December page, which says Merry Christmas with kind of a white-ish background and the poinsettia and Christmas greenery. I'm using this round Christmas ornament sign from Dollar Tree, and I'm placing the sign onto the calendar page, then tracing around it. Then I cut out the calendar page and I'm cutting along my trace marks. I'm taking off this silver piece on top of the ornament sign. Then I'm hot gluing the calendar page onto the sign. Now that the calendar page is on there, I'm adding the silver part of the ornament back onto the sign with some hot glue. To decorate the sign a little bit more, I'm using this red cotton rope, and I'm cutting out a piece long enough to go around the whole sign. I'm hot gluing one end to the back of the sign so you can't see it. Then I'm adding hot glue all around the edge of the sign and pressing the rope in place all around. And I'm ending it again at the back of the sign and cutting it off, hot gluing it in place. And this is the finished sign. This is a very classy Christmas sign, super pretty for Christmas.
The first gingerbread tiered tray DIYs are a gingerbread man cookie and a gingerbread house. I traced the outline of a gingerbread man onto a piece of paper. I got a picture of a gingerbread man on my laptop, then just traced it onto the paper, but of course you could freehand it as well. I'm tracing this onto a piece of cardboard, then cutting it out. I have this sheet of cork from Dollar Tree, and I'm tracing the gingerbread man onto the cork and cutting it out. Now I have these two gingerbread man cutouts, and I'm gluing the cork sheet outline onto the cardboard one. This is just to make sure my gingerbread man is a little more sturdy. I have this red and white ribbon from Dollar Tree, and I'm making it into a bow for a little bow tie on my gingerbread man. Before I glue that on, I'm going to ice the gingerbread cookies, and I'm using this white dimensional fabric paint. I'm drawing on a face and some designs with the fabric paint.
I let the fabric paint dry for more than 24 hours, and now I'm hot gluing the bow tie onto the gingerbread man. To make him able to stand up on my tiered tray, I'm using 2 tumbling tower blocks and hot gluing them to the back of the gingerbread man. I'm repeating the process for the gingerbread house, cutting out a house shape piece from the cork sheet and also a house shape from the cardboard, then hot gluing the cork and the cardboard together. I'm using the same dimensional fabric paint to draw designs on the house. I'm also adding a large tumbling tower block to the back of the house so it'll stand up on my tiered tray. Next mini DIY is this gingerbread sign. I'm using 8 of these tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. I'm hot gluing the blocks together to make a frame. I am going to be staining them, which I do recommend doing before gluing them all together. I'm using this maple gel stain from DecoArt to stain the blocks. I'm adding a bit to the frame with a brush, then I'm using a cloth to stain the blocks. I'm tracing my frame onto a piece of white poster board, then cutting it out. Now I'm hot gluing the poster board to the blocks, making it the back of the sign. I made this baked fresh daily decal with my Cricut, and I'm sticking it onto my sign. I cut out 3 tiny gingerbread cookies out of the cork sheet, and I'm hot gluing them onto my sign. I'm going to paint the back and sides of my sign with this paint from DecoArt in the shade Raw Sienna. I have this thin acrylic paint pen from Deco Color, and I'm using it to add designs to my tiny gingerbread cookies. I really like this pen because it's super fine and good for detail. Gingerbread themed tiered tray DIY is this cutting board. I cut out a cutting board shape out of cardboard, and I'm painting it red with paint from Dollar Tree. I created this Baking Spirits Bright decal on Cricut Design Space with a couple little gingerbread cookies on the sides. I want this cutting board to be able to stand up on my tiered tray, so I'm hot gluing one of these large tumbling tower blocks to the back of it. The next gingerbread tiered tray DIY is a mini stack of books. I'm using 6 of these tumbling tower blocks from Dollarama, which are larger than the Dollar Tree ones. I'm painting the blocks with the Raw Sienna paint. I'm gluing the blocks together to form the book stack in 2 layers, 3 blocks per layer. I cut out little decals that say gingerbread cookies made with love, and I'm sticking them onto the blocks. I'm taking this red and white string and I'm tying it around the book stack and making a bow on top. I folded the string in half before tying it around the blocks, so it's a double bow. The next gingerbread tiered tray mini DIY is this sweet word sign. I have these letters from Dollar Tree, and I'm spelling out the word sweet. I could only find one E in my stash, even though I know I have another one somewhere. So I'm turning an F into an E with a Sharpie. Now, when I added the other line onto the F, it made it a lot thicker than the other letters. So I thought it looked a little funny. To make it blend in more, I'm going over all the letters with the Sharpie and thickening them up so it's all cohesive. I have this little piece of wood that was from a Dollar Tree sign, and I kept it because I was sure I could use it for something. I'm painting it with the Raw Sienna color, and this will be the back of our little sign. Now I'm gluing the letters onto the wood piece. The next DIY is a craft stick Christmas tree. I'm using these craft sticks from Dollar Tree to make a Christmas tree. I'm trimming the craft sticks so there are 5 pieces, starting with the longest piece on the bottom and getting smaller toward the top. I'm also using another craft stick on the back to keep all of these pieces together. I'm painting all my craft sticks white with this white acrylic paint from DecoArt. I'm hot gluing the 5 smaller craft stick pieces to the longer piece, leaving a bit of space between each one. I'm also gluing a small wood cube from Dollar Tree to the back of the tree so it can stand up on my tiered tray. This gold star is from Dollar Tree, and I'm painting it silver with this metallic paint from DecoArt. I cut out some Christmas-themed words with my Cricut on red vinyl. I chose joy, peace, merry, and believe. I'm weeding these out, then sticking them onto my tree. I also cut out a mini candy cane for the top piece of the tree, and I think this looks so cute. Now I'm hot gluing the star to the top of the tree. This DIY is a mini snow globe with a tiny little snowman inside. First, I'm making a mini snowman out of 3 wood beads. One of them is already white from a previous project, but I'm painting them all white with acrylic paint. I put them onto a skewer just because I find that's the easiest way for me to paint the wood beads. While that dries, I'm making the snowman's hat out of a black pipe cleaner. I'm folding down the very tip of the pipe cleaner 4 times to make the top of the hat. Then I'm wrapping the pipe cleaner around a couple of times in a circular pattern for the base of the hat. And this is what the little hat looks like all finished. I'm hot gluing this to the snowman's head. I'm using this chenille garland for the snowman's scarf. This is kind of like a pipe cleaner, but there's no wire in it, so it's not stiff. I cut off a piece and I'm tying it around his neck. Now I'm just drawing on his eyes, mouth, and buttons with a black fine liner. And I'm adding on a carrot nose with an orange fine liner. I'm taking 5 of these little trees from Dollar Tree and I'm hot gluing them together to make them different heights. I took the little round bases of the trees off, mostly to save space inside the mini terrarium. I'm hot gluing my little forest to the back of the snowman. And I'm hot gluing the snowman to the lid of the ornament. I also have a few of these mini pine cones from Dollar Tree, and I'm hot gluing them to my winter scene. I'm adding some fake glittery snow to my ornament, then I'm screwing the lid back on and shaking it around. I love how some of the snow gets stuck to all the sides of the ornament. I think it just looks so pretty and frosty, perfect for winter. This DIY is a pretty white yarn Christmas tree. I'm taking an empty cracker box and cutting it so the cardboard lays flat, and then I'm also cutting off all the tabs. I'm rolling the cardboard into a cone shape and hot gluing it in place. I'm cutting the bottom of the tree off to make it smaller and also to make it be able to stand up on my tray. I have this white yarn that I believe was from Michael's, and I'm going to cover the whole cardboard cone with it. I went over the tree with about 3 layers of the yarn, so don't worry about having any gaps as you go because it'll all be covered up. I'm also focusing a bit more of the yarn toward the bottom of the tree to make the bottom even thicker and have more of the pronounced cone shape. I have this red and white twine, and I'm wrapping it around the tree diagonally. I just hot glued it at the top and again at the bottom once I'd wrapped it all around. I'm using some of the pearls from this ornament filler bag, and I'm hot gluing 5 of them onto the tree. I painted one of the Dollar Tree stars silver, and I'm hot gluing it to the top of the tree. The next DIY is a mini 3D Christmas truck. I'm using 2 of these little Dollar Tree wood trucks. I'm painting the trucks red with Dollar Tree acrylic paint. I'm also painting one of the tumbling tower blocks, which I will be using later in the DIY. Then I'm painting the trees with this Deco Art paint in the shade Holly Green. And finally, I'm painting the tires black. I want the truck to be 3D and to be able to stand up on its own, so I'm hot gluing the block to one of the trucks and gluing the other truck on that, making sure to line them up as much as possible. This DIY is a wood block Christmas present. I'm using this wood block from Dollar Tree. I'm painting it red with the Dollar Tree paint. I'm turning this into a present, so I'm taking this red and white candy cane ribbon from Dollar Tree, and I'm wrapping one piece around the block and gluing it in place at the top. Then I'm taking another piece of ribbon and wrapping it around the block the opposite way so it crosses over the other piece of ribbon. Now I'm making a bow for the top of the present. I'm making 3 loops with the ribbon, then hot gluing it to the top of the present. I'm also making a couple other separate loops and hot gluing those to the block to make my bow nice and full. This ribbon isn't wired, so I'm using little dabs of hot glue to keep all the pieces of the bow in place. One of the tails ended up a little too short, so I'm trimming it down and replacing it with a longer piece of ribbon. My ribbon frayed quite a lot, so I'm going over with scissors and just trimming off all of the excess frayed bits. Here is my finished Christmas tiered tray with all my little mini DIYs. I love all of the red and the white, and although this is more Christmas themed, I think a few of these could also work throughout the winter season, like the little winter terrarium, and even the trees and the little truck. I also added a little pair of skis from Dollar Tree because I thought it matched the red and white theme. This DIY is a red and white wood bead Christmas garland. I'm taking some white and red acrylic paint and painting some wooden beads with them, alternating the red and white. I lined them up in the order I wanted them to go, with a smaller bead, then a larger bead, and a smaller bead, etc., continuing the pattern along. Next, I'm taking this metal tag from Dollar Tree and painting it with the same red paint from Deco Art in the shade Cinnamon Drop. I'm using this red and white twine from Dollar Tree, and I'm looping it through the tag and tying a knot so it stays in place. Then I'm weaving all of the beads onto the twine. Once all the beads are in place, I'm tying a couple of knots so they don't fall off. Then I'm taking a couple more strands of the twine and tying them to the end here so I can have a few little red and white tails sticking out from the end of my bead garland. I cut this Peppermint Kisses decal out with my Cricut in white vinyl, and now I'm using some transfer tape to stick it onto the metal tag. This DIY is a red and white candy cane factory book stack. Using 6 of the tumbling tower blocks from Dollarama, I'm gluing all the blocks together to make 3 layers, 2 blocks per layer. You can see these are painted brown. That was from a previous DIY, but we're going to be covering that up today with this chalk paint from Folk Art. I'm painting over top of the brown with the white paint, And this is a great example of how you can reuse things in different seasons or different years, depending on whatever look you're going for. You don't always have to buy new supplies. Instead of cutting out words with my Cricut for this DIY, I decided to use this paint marker from Deco Art and write on my book stack instead. I'm writing out North Pole Candy Cane Factory. And I don't love how this turned out. It definitely would have looked better using the Cricut vinyl. The pen itself is pretty easy to use, but I just found it really hard to get nice exact lettering, especially on these blocks where my hand didn't really have a place to rest. I particularly messed up the second C in Candy Cane, and I just could not stand how that looked. So I covered that bit up with some of the white paint, and then I'm going to go back and redraw the C. Next, I'm taking this red and white candy cane striped ribbon from Dollar Tree, and I'm wrapping it around the book stack, then hot gluing it in place. I'm taking another piece of the ribbon and making 2 loops to form a little bow, then hot gluing that on top. For this tiered tray DIY, I'm making a little sign using this thin piece of wood, which came from something from Dollar Tree, and I'm painting it red with the cinnamon drop paint from Deco Art. I cut out this candy canes 5 cents each decal with the Cricut, and it also has a little cutout of a candy cane at the bottom, and I'm sticking it to my wood piece.